going to go ahead. Hello, welcome to day 2 of the American Military and American Public University System Active Minds Chapter Suicide Prevention and Awareness Symposium. Day 1 was on September 17th. So if you missed that, no worries, we will be sharing out our YouTube and website so that you can find those recordings later should you like to listen back to them. And if you are having trouble hearing, you can indicate that, but just for a mic check, can somebody give me a thumbs up if you can hear me to make sure that I am being heard? Okay, I got a couple there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to Dr. Lulu, the amazing Dr. Lulu. I'm going to read a little bit of her biography here, and then I'm going to turn it over to her for her presentation on suicide in the LGBTQ plus youth and how we can help. So Dr. Lulu, AKA Mamatrician, is a board certified pediatrician and mom of 3 sons. She is proudly Nigerian born and a youth suicide prevention activist. She is CEO of teenalive.com and Dr. Lulu's Youth Health Center, both dedicated to youth suicide prevention. She is a TEDx, United Nations, and Global Pan-African speaker and a 3-time best-selling author, as well as freelance writer. She speaks mostly about youth trauma and youth suicide. A former lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, she completed medical school at Ahmadu Bello University Teaching Hospital, Zaria, Kaduna State, Nigeria, and her residency at Howard University Hospital, Washington, D.C. She was medical director for the largest minority-owned pediatric practice in Lancaster and Chester County, South Carolina, prior to commissioning into the Air Force, and is a now proud veteran. A certified life coach, she focuses mainly on parents of LGBTQ plus children, helping them accept, protect, nurture, and support their children so they can thrive and flourish in their lives without judgment or limitations. As a mother of a non-binary child, she calls herself an LGBTQ plus activist and draws attention to the plight of LGBTQ plus kids, particularly transgender children, especially with regards to their high rate of suicide. She has been featured on local affiliates such as ABC, CBS, and NBC, and her articles have been published in blackpast.org, Parents Magazine, Washington Post, and many other syndicated media outlets. She has testified at the Texas House of Representatives and is a Goodwill Ambassador of Nigerians in the Diaspora Commission. Lastly, she is currently working on her 4th and 5th books that should be coming out by September 2021, an anthology about immigrant women, a guide for parents of LGBTQ plus children, and she hosts her own show on Facebook and YouTube and moderates her own Facebook group and room in Clubhouse. She can be found on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and lives in San Antonio, Texas. I will share her contact info in the chat and take it away, Dr. Lulu.
Yay. Buenas tardes, buenos dias, depending where you are. I'm going to start my presentation. So if I have any questions, please just leave them in the chat. I know you know that. And I can't see you, but Rhi, can you just give me a thumbs up if it's in play mode? Yes? Oh no, not thumbs up. Say something because I can't see you.
Yes, it's working fine. Go for it.
All right, so suicide and the LGBTQ plus child. I know the title is a little bit different from what it says. It was just too many words to put in. So I just used this one. But I'm very, very excited to be here. And yes, I do speak 8 languages fluently, so I might just switch into some language at any point in time. So for the icebreaker, have you lost a family member to suicide, or do you have a family member in the queer space? Can someone please type in the chat, and Rhi, if you could help me just read out what they're saying. So don't be shy. I'm not one of those speakers that's just talking. I'm usually engaging my audience as much as possible so I can stay awake. So I see 2 comments. Rhea, could you just read them to me, please? And thank you.
Yes, we have yeses, lost an uncle to suicide, a family member in LGBTQ. I lost my grandfather. Dr. Ratliff, I know, lost someone as well. So several yeses.
Very good. So first of all, thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that. While I have not lost anyone that we know of to suicide on my family side, I have actively been suicidal. I have a child who has been suicidal as a result of what we're going to talk about today. And I've lost patients, I've lost friends in the medical space to suicide. And it's just a thing. At this point, I think it's safe to say it's a pandemic. So my talk usually is raw, and so it will trigger strong emotions. I'm just going to let you know right now, and I will not be upset if you feel a need to leave my talk. Thank you so much. So the objectives today, we're going to create awareness for the current up-to-date statistics in the queer space. And I like to use the word queer. It's just easier than LGBTQ+. So bear with me on that one. And it is actually a thing now. We have claimed back the word queer, so it's now good. To illustrate the dangers of lack of acceptance of the queer kids, to show steps that we could take to help, and then to share resources and how to connect with more. So who am I and what's my why? So believe it or not, I am 52 years young. I like to say that I'm a queen-ager. I am also everything that Rhea said, including the one voice from the African diaspora for real, who is doing what I'm doing. Why am I doing this? After 30 years of being a pediatrician, and after 30 years of helping kids, last summer, my own child, who was graduating with the top honors from Stanford, during the presentation, the gentleman kept saying, they this and they that, and they this and they that. I'm like, dude, aren't you the only one winning the award? Who are these other people that he's talking about? And then my middle son said, Mom, I think it's because Papa is non-binary. I'm like, is that? What is that? What is non-binary? This is me after knowing that they have been gay their whole life since they were, 9 months I've known. But last summer, this hit me from nowhere. I'm like, what is it? And so I realized that if I can struggle with this, then there are other people out there who are struggling, who are also parents. And as a pediatrician who has owned my own practice for high risk or at-risk kids, I realized that I can work all I want on these kids, but they're going to go back home to their parents. And if the parents are
all right, so for my top of the table, we look ahead.
If the parents are not with it, then we got a problem. So that's why I decided to do what I'm doing. So we're going to sit back, relax, and enjoy this video footage.
To Sunday, when people will fill the streets of New York City for one of the largest annual Pride marches in the world. Many of this year's events will also be virtual. The New York City Pride Parade is a massive celebration inspiring the fight for LGBTQ+ equality. It began after the Stonewall Uprising in 1969, when police raided a gay bar in the city. Pride celebrations are also taking place in other cities this month. We spoke with the parents of LGBTQ+ kids and adults about their journeys and how they are proud as well.
This is my favorite picture of Namdi. That's my baby, all up in their glory. When they were 16, they came out as gay, but when they were graduating from Stanford last summer, I was made to understand that they were non-binary and their preferred pronouns are they, them, theirs. I was a little shocked and even maybe a little scared. What does that mean? I had to quickly get with the program.
We knew that Natalie was discovering something about herself. At about 12 or 13, she came up and said, how would I feel if she was a lesbian? We didn't have any problem. Cooper is gender nonconforming, which means the way he expresses himself to the world is what we stereotypically call female. But he's very adamant he's a boy.
Magdi came up to me and said that she kind of liked boys and girls. We have another son who had told us like 2-3 years before that he was gay, and it was shocking. We got to the point of saying, hey, they're our children, and no matter what they are, we love them, we respect them, and we're going to accept them the way they are.
Everything that I wanted for my daughter to succeed in life, she can still have. Just because she's not going to have a husband, she'll have a wife instead. Doesn't mean that she can't have everything that she wants.
Quererlos, entenderlos, porque son nuestros hijos y ellos no decidieron venir a nacer en este mundo, ¿no?
The newborn picture I took of him, he's wearing a blue onesie and he has a football next to him. In my mind, I had Cooper going on the same journey as my older son. Having a child like Cooper has really made me realize that our children are born the way they are.
If your child comes out to you as queer, then you should be glad and thankful that you've created a safe space in your heart and in your home.
The world can be kind of hard on you sometimes, especially when people think you're different.
Homophobia is real, transphobia is real, lesbophobia, all those things are real. But your love and your understanding and your acceptance, to me, is a lethal weapon against those things.
I wish that everybody would respect them as human beings.
40% of children like mine attempt suicide. I decided that I was not going to be my child's first bully, that I was going to be there to support him and make sure that he knew that he was going to survive and thrive.
I'm proud of Namdi because not only have they challenged me, they've also taught me. What I do is empower my child to go out every day and just have no apologies for being bold and black and beautiful. Yo soy una madre orgullosa de todo lo que planeé se ha realizado.
Magdi has been a productive citizen, a very loving daughter, and she has made us grandparents.
I love her creativity, love her confidence. I really do love the fact that she is who she is and she doesn't let anybody tell her differently. Cooper is sassy and he is smart and he is kind and he really just embraces life for what it is.
My name is Rafael Hurtado.
My name is Magdalena Hurtado.
And we are the proud parents of 3 LGBTQ children, including Magdi and my grandson.
My name is Jennifer Solomon. I'm the proud parent of Cooper.
My name is Dr. Lulu, and I'm the proud parent of my young adult, Namdi.
My name is Christy Sanchez, and I'm a proud parent of Natalie.
How lucky and blessed are these kids to have parents like that?
They so are.
Yeah.
It is. It's really wonderful to see how supportive they are. And I love what the one parent said, the doctor who said love and understanding is a lethal weapon.
Yeah. You know, parents have expectations for their kids no matter what. And you just have to realize they are who they are.
They are who they are.
Out of the way. Just get out of the way.
All right. And we'll take
Oh,
All right, so for my top of the table, we look.
So let's give a round of applause to all of those parents who are supporting their kids in spite of all of that craziness out there, honey. And you know you have arrived when the anchor uses your sound bite. What? I was like, no, he didn't. Yes, he did. So let's talk about some suicide rates, shall we? I love what Cooper's mother said. She said, I did not want to be my child's first bully. I want to say that again for those at the back. I did not want to be my child's first bully. Let's remember that. So suicide rates, all youth, and if you don't know this yet, suicide is the second leading cause of death for children aged 10 through 34. That's all kids in middle school, all kids in high school, all kids in college. most young adults who are leaving college, and maybe even doctors and residents as well. So when you hear doctors are killing themselves, it's because it is real, it's a real thing. I can speak for doctors because I'm one, okay? So that's all youth versus LGBTQ plus youth. Of course, if suicide is the second leading cause of death in all youth, it's also the second leading cause of death in LGBTQ plus youth. It's second only to, get this, accidents. I have a podcast called Suicide Pages. Look it up. In that podcast, I interview more than 200 human beings, and almost all of them said the same thing. They wanted to make their suicide look like an accident. So if that's the case, and the numbers are telling us accidents is suicide is second only to accidents, and people want to make their suicide look like accidents, I think you know where I'm going with that. LGBTQ plus youth versus gender nonconformists like Cooper, like my child. They have the highest rate of suicide amongst all of the LGBTQ plus kids. We're going to look at why in a minute. Strong stuff. So in the next 20 seconds, according to the WHO's prediction from 2020, somebody somewhere has died by suicide. 20 seconds is a new norm. And we all know that suicides, most of them are not reported. So in the time I've been speaking, how many seconds, how many 20 seconds is that? Just so you can see the burden of this problem, okay? Then, because numbers matter, 5.6% of US adults who care to tell the truth are in the queer space. 52% of the youth, all youth are in the queer space. So that's more than half. So your child is likely more than not likely to be in the queer space. And this is only those who responded. 7.6% of those kids, of the people that were asked the questionnaire, did not respond. 7.6% of them abstained from responding. And you know what? When someone has pleaded the fifth or doesn't want to say anything, silence means what? So 52% of youth are queer. So you need to check it before you wreck it, right? 52% is a lot of people. 16% of the Gen Zers, actually it's 15.9, but I made it 16, why not? As at February 2021, are in the queer space. 16%, almost 20, almost 1 in 5. And you and I know that most of the homeless kids, 1/3 of them is what they say, but for me, I feel like it's most of them are queer. So 1 in 3 homeless youth is in the LGBTQ plus space. That's why my nonprofit is called the Lulu's Angels Foundation. It's going to be building a house or having a home for homeless LGBTQ plus youth. 75 to 90% of these kids are bullied at school. So that's why Cooper's mom saying she didn't want to be the first bully makes a lot of sense. Some people say 40% like Cooper's mom said, but it's actually 42% of these kids in the last 12 months said they seriously considered suicide. 42%. And that's the breakdown. 31% of them are indigenous, 21% are Black, almost twice the number of white at 12%. Latinos, they're not doing too badly at 18%, and others, Asians, Nigerians, whoever, right? Come in at 18% also. So this is my TED Talk. One of the things I said I was gonna do for my, I call my lockdown legacy from last year was land a TED Talk. And you know what, I believe in the laws of attraction. So this is my TED Talk from September 2020. Enjoy. Hopefully it will play. Good.
20 seconds. That's how long I've been standing here silent. And according to WHO's predictions for the year 2020, in that time, someone somewhere has died by suicide. And the next person might be your child. In 2017, the WHO declared adolescent suicide a global public health crisis. In the year 2020, the American Academy of Pediatrics declared youth suicide a national and a global public health crisis. In the next 12 minutes, we're going to discuss youth suicide and try to understand why our kids kill themselves. And I'll teach you 3 things you can do to help curb that pandemic, no pun intended. But let me first state that this talk might trigger some strong emotions in some of us. That said, people ask me all the time, why did I become a pediatrician? And I say it's simple. I love kids. Then I had kids. And between their boyish shenanigans and sibling rivalry, I realized that I can't protect my kids from childhood trauma, especially numero tres over there. Like their parents' divorce, or the effect of the domestic abuse their mother endured, or from who I am as a result of my own childhood trauma. You see, you can't see by looking at me, but when I was 9 years old, I was lured into a cornfield by a friendly adult neighbor. I remember him pushing me onto the ground and laying on top of me. I can still feel the grass and the leaves scratching my skin, the smell of raw corn, the taste and grittiness of sand in my mouth and between my teeth as I tried to scream, but no sound came out. You know, I never really talk about that. Most people don't know about that. Like most adults, I'm largely silent about the traumas that I've endured, like the near daily bullying in elementary school on the bus, or racial profiling in America, or my rape in medical school. But one cold November morning in 2015, I swear all the ghosts of my trauma's past were chasing me down a highway in San Antonio, Texas. I was going at over 85 miles an hour. My thoughts and my heart were racing just as fast. I had no seatbelt on. The rooftop of my convertible was down. I was trying to go see God. I was looking for an opening. Anyone here ever heard about ACEs or adverse childhood experiences, or AKA childhood trauma? If you haven't, let me explain. In 1995, the Center for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente studied 17,000 adults for 2 years. They were looking for the effect of physical, sexual, emotional, and other traumas sustained during childhood. And their studies showed that indeed, childhood trauma does cause significant medical conditions, including mental health challenges and suicide in some, in later adult life. But what about a child that's currently undergoing trauma? What happens to them? What's the first thing you think about when you hear about a suicide? Mental illness, depression, the obvious low-hanging fruit. While depression certainly increases the rate of suicide, in children, we must examine the underlying causes of said depressive behavior. Because as far as I know, no child was born sad and depressed and trying to kill themselves. Something happened. In the past few years, in the United States at least, prescription strength antidepressant use has nearly quadrupled. And in that time frame, suicide rates have continued to soar. How do we reconcile that? And so my argument is that mental anguish and not mental illness is at the crux of most suicides. And in children, trauma is the epicenter in the form of bullying and child abuse and domestic violence and racism and police brutality and toxic relationships, none of which prescription strength medications can fix. You know, when I started working with at-risk youth, I realized that kids that kill themselves are not really simply depressed. Oh no. Amongst other things, they have been betrayed by systems that allow other kids to bully them and adults to prey on them like I was. Betrayed by parents and caregivers who for the most part miss the signs, which by the way, 4 out of 5 teens who attempt suicide leave a sign. And a prior suicide attempt is the strongest risk factor for suicide death. Did you know that suicide is second only to accidents as the leading cause of death for kids aged 10 through 34? Or that African-American kids aged 5 through 12 are twice as likely as their white counterparts to die by suicide? or that LGBTQ youth, particularly trans youth and indigenous youth across the globe, all have a high rate of suicide attempt? One word: trauma. Yes, self-loathing, low self-worth, and negative intrusive thoughts are the key features in the suicide notes of his victims. And so you ask Dr. Lulu, what's up with that? Why is it happening? I thought you'd never ask. You know? In the interest of time, we're going to look at one case, Miss Naika Venant. Because 2 years ago, when I was still a general pediatrician, I quit my job to examine exactly the answer to that question. And so Miss Naika is a 14-year-old female from Miami, Florida, who streamed her suicide live on Facebook only 3 weeks after, check this, another teen suicide for alleged sexual assault by a family member. Betrayal? Check. While Naika used a scarf, some kids will use other personal items like a belt or a jump rope, but most kids will use firearms, often found at home, like my neighbor's son did a few weeks ago in San Antonio. For 3 long hours, onlookers watched and laughed and egged Naika on. One of them was actually allegedly her own mother. The Miami Herald described her death as a lonely death. In their write-up, they questioned if Naika felt invisible most of her life. After all, she endured countless episodes of physical, sexual, emotional, and other traumas while in a system that at one point placed her in up to 16 different foster homes in the space of only 8 months. Perhaps she chose a Facebook Live because she finally wanted to be seen. Silence, shame, stigma, and a mix of raw emotions is the perfect recipe for the worst outcome of trauma during childhood. But there's hope. Yes, there's hope. Studies have shown that formerly suicidal youth who can find one single trusted adult in their lives will thrive. That sanctuary is what I offer my patients in my youth suicide prevention practice. And you too can do the same. Yes, you can be the one for the at-risk youth around you. And maybe you can join me in creating a youth suicide-free world by the year 2025. But that's around the corner. So we need to hurry. First thing to do, look for signs. They're everywhere. Remember 4 out of 5? The commonest signs are 1, asking questions, writing, talking about death. Most kids don't do that. Second sign, feelings of shame and hopelessness and worthlessness. Third sign, recklessness or a loss of interest in activities they once loved or just giving away their prized possessions. Second thing you can do, offer these kids empathy and compassion, not judgment and more medications. Third thing you can do, talk to them. And for me, talk stands for tuning in to the right radio frequency of your child, AKA know your kid. Secondly, ask the right questions. What's happening? What happened? Never ask why. And I know you're going to say this. Asking questions about suicide does not make somebody become suicidal. If anything at all, the child will feel like you care about them. And so I permit you to ask the right questions. And if you're going to ask questions, you might as well listen. And so I recommend you lean in, lead from the heart, close the space, and just listen. And of course, keep communication lines wide open as you get them effective help. Because you know one thing that happened in November of 2015, that day could have ended very, very badly for me. But I decided to make some changes in my life. Here's the thing though, I'm an adult. I can make changes in my life. Most kids cannot. And that's where you come in. And so the first thing I did was analyze my situation, and I realized that my antidepressants were making me worse. And the second thing I did was I realized that my voice is the loudest voice in my head, and the things I was saying to myself were not good. Needless to say, I've since changed the way I speak to myself. And the third thing I got myself effective help. And by the help and support and love of my family members and friends, and numero tres, even if we have to carry him along, I can proudly say that I am so thriving, like my friend D. Lamar would say. And I do the exact same thing for my patients. The first thing we do is analyze their thoughts, their traumas. Yes, we literally name them one by one. And the second thing we do is uncover their triggers. Let me tell you something about triggers. They're usually within 100 to 200 square feet from where the child is standing. And so you, my friend, might be a trigger. And the third thing we do is help them control the negative thoughts in their head by teaching them how to acknowledge the thoughts, analyze the thoughts for veracity, and then act based on the analysis. And knock on wood, my patients today are also thriving. And so do me a huge favor. Next time you hear about suicide in a child, I want you to think of 3 words: trauma, trauma, trauma. Always look for underlying factors. Always ask the right questions. Avoid jumping to a diagnosis of mental illness or giving medications, because you know what? If a child is being serially raped by her uncle or being cyberbullied by their friends, they're not mentally ill. They are being traumatized.
That's right.
And so in ending, I'm going to give you my original quote. A suicide attempt is never a cry for attention. It is always a cry for help. And so I'm going to ask you to please rise and join me in observing 20 more seconds of silence in honor of these people we keep losing every single day to suicide, beginning.
Boom, right there. All right. So thank you so much for watching. Let me hope I can do this correctly. There. So childhood trauma. First of all, can a sister get a round of applause for that TED Talk, honey? I know I can't hear y'all, but I believe you're giving me some virtual rounds of applause back there, because that was good. Okay, and I was looking good too. So let's look at a little bit of childhood trauma. Like as you know, I'm a physician, like literally 30 years of being a doctor. But I believe in my heart that childhood trauma, like the research said, is at the crux of most medical illnesses, including suicide. So I had asked my friend Ree to share the ACE questionnaire, but she couldn't. So I just did some cropping and some magic today. And these are the questions that we ask for ACEs. If you're a parent and you take your child to see the doctor for a physical, I want you to tell your doctor that Dr. Lulu said to do an ACE questionnaire on your child. When you go to the doctor, you can also ask the same, because believe it or not, numbers increase, and from a score of 4 and up, you have 1,220% chance of chronic medical illnesses, including mental illnesses and suicide, for a score of 4 or more. Just 4. Did a parent or other adult in your house often push, grab, slap, or throw things at you? What? If you're Nigerian or you're Mexican, that's it right there with the chancla. Did you often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, had no one to protect you? Those are questions like that. Were your parents ever separated or divorced? That's my kids. Were any of your parents or other adult caregivers often pushed or grabbed? That's me, my kids again, you know? So before you know it, you're already scoring 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, and you already know that 4 or more is what we're looking for. So you're welcome to Google ACEs and just try to do your own homework and look at your own scores. So why do queer kids become suicidal? Why? What's up with that? So this is from www.one.nyc.gov. So it says right there that being LGBT alone does not put a young person at higher risk for suicide. No, it is the discrimination, the rejection, the fear, the harassment, all that. That's what makes the child say, you know what? I don't like this world that I'm in. If you were that person, you would do the same. So be very careful when you say, well, not you, but when you hear people say or insinuate that because the child is gay or because the child is queer, that's why they are suicidal. No, your child is okay. You, on the other hand, you might need to see me. So it's a perfect storm of childhood trauma, AKA rejection, betrayal by parents, bullying by peers, and The child himself starts having intrusive thoughts, like we said in the TED Talk. They start having negative self-image. They start having negative self-talk. Because if anybody tells you long enough that you're stupid, you're going to start thinking you are stupid. So yes, the reasons are threefold. Yourself, thinking negative thoughts about yourself, LGBT or not really, as a matter of fact. Family who rejects you is a major problem, y'all. And society like Texas, where we have rules in the legislature trying to erase human beings for who they are, Oh my goodness. And so for the non-binary and transgender youth, more than half of these youth seriously consider suicide in the past 12 months. Don't ask me for thoughts and prayers. Protect your child first. Then we don't have to get there. Respect the pronouns, people. If somebody says that they, them, she, her, whatever they say, just respect it. It really, truly costs you 0 red cents. If somebody changes their name to Biscuit, call them Biscuit. It doesn't take anything. My own parents call me Dr. Lulu. They didn't name me Dr. Lulu, but that's what I want to be called. It really, truly doesn't take anything out of you. Affirming spaces decrease suicide rates. Conversion therapy increases suicide attempts. Yes, I said it. Es verdad. So what can you do? We should all be allies, period. That's it. Including parents like me who are also in the queer space. So who is an ally? You. Everyone is an ally. First of all, you chose to come here today. You're an ally. You could have been doing anything with your time. It's Friday, but you are here. Anybody who advocates for or supports a marginalized person is an ally. Any person or nation that associates with another for some common cause or purpose is an ally. My best description is not here. It's the one that says that you are supporting somebody without necessarily being part of the group. Oh yeah, okay, that's the second one, yes. But is not a member of the group, that one. That's my thing right there. That's the ally right there. And truly, it doesn't cost you nothing. So next time you see that flag, you know that that's your flag. That's the ally flag. And what's an ally? Always center the impact. I like that. Listen and learn from those who live in oppression. Leverage your privilege. If you're not in the queer space, you don't know what it's like to be in the queer space, trust me. And yield the floor, AKA allow them to be who they are. So I already talked about what talk is to me. Tune in to your child. Listen with 2 ears. Ask the right questions with the one mouth. Listen again fully without judgment. Don't say, I know what you're feeling like. You don't know what I feel like. Truly, you don't. Keep communication lines open. Allow them to come in. Open the heart space so that they will come in. And so if you don't mind my asking, please use the comment section to tell me what else can you do? Because I'm sure talk is not exclusive. And Rhi, if you could just read the comments and let me know what are people saying about what else we can do when it comes to being an ally or trying to help these people as I take a sip of my gin and juice.
Are you okay if they also unmute and just share with their voices?
Yes, ma'am. I just can't see people. I don't know the technology. If I do that, I won't be able to come back where I am. So, but yes, ma'am, I can. Absolutely. Let's do it. I don't know how much more time I have, but I'm almost done with my talk. So it doesn't really matter anymore.
You have 18 minutes, so you're fine on time.
Your time. Very good. I'll take my time then. So anybody wants to unmute themselves, please feel free. Otherwise, we'll keep going. I mean, who else says we can hear you when you type? Oh, Rhi, I'm sorry. So somebody said something here. Let me see. Remind us, something said or shown can be triggering. Please practice self-care during. Yes, that is so true. That is so true. Compassion fatigue is a thing. And honestly, saving somebody from suicide is a very, very emotional thing. It weighs heavily on you. So you probably need to get therapy for that. Does anybody want to take a jab at what I was saying, as telling us what else we can do as allies to help? But yeah, so talk is my personal mnemonic that I came up with. Y'all can have it. And I came up with talk because the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention actually uses Talk Save Lives as one of their hashtags and Silence Kills as the other hashtag. So I figured, what can I come up with talk, because talk saves lives. Speak up to help educate others who may have misconceptions about those. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Speak up to help others who are, yes. And actually my next book, believe it or not, that's Bio Rhi I have to just confess, is a little old. I'm actually working on my 5th and 6th books. And the 5th book is called Myths, Mistakes, and Misconceptions About Your LGBTQ plus child. So stand by for that. It should drop by October, which is next month. Yikes! Oh my goodness. Okay, I don't know if it's going to drop by October, but I love the TALK acronym. That's powerful. Thank you so much. So don't be shy. If you want to unmute yourself, just do that. In the meantime, we'll keep going. I know that there's a lot more things you can do. You can actually stay with them. If someone is actively suicidal, you can literally stay with them and just say nothing. Studies have shown that people who are actively suicidal really, truly are ambivalent about dying. In other words, they don't really want to die. And then again, they want to die. So just you being there and just holding space for them, just hugging them, saying nothing if you have nothing, if you don't know what to say. A lot of times it's enough. You can even ask them, do you want me to say anything? And a lot of times they just want you to stay there. If you're on the phone with them, they'll keep them talking. I had a mom who lost a patient, who lost a child, or actually it was a sister-in-law, to suicide. She was actively talking to her on the phone, but she might have said something, the wrong thing, I don't know. But the lady, did what she had to do at that point. So keep them talking is what they said. And then take them to the doctor, take them to the hospital. And as much as possible, don't tell them, well, you need to go see someone. Or you know what, you shouldn't be feeling like killing yourself. You've got 3 cars or you've got 2 kids. When I was actively suicidal, when I was driving down that highway that day, I had all those things. But thankfully, my spouse was like, not on my watch. And what she did was cancel all of her appointments and stayed with me for the whole week. And then we went to Austin, then we went to the Chinese garden to look at the koi fish or whatever, went to the zoo. We left the house and I was able to leave that space because a lot of times when it actually happens, people, the feeling does wane. The feeling actually wanes. Like if you feel like you want to kill yourself, after a while, it does wane. So in summary, we looked at suicide rates, the fact that suicide is the second leading cause of death for kids aged 10 through 34. 10 through 34. That's a lot of kids. I'm going to tell you something at this point. The youngest recorded child that died by suicide was 5. They were not necessarily LGBT, I don't know, but that child was 5. And please notice how I said they were not necessarily LGBT. One of the things that we tell people to do is if you don't know somebody's pronoun, it's okay to use they, them. And yes, they, them can be used for singular. You know why I said that? If you're walking down the hallway or you're walking down the street and you see somebody's cell phone, what are you going to say? Oh, someone lost their cell phone, right? Yes. Someone lost their cell phone is what you're going to say. So we have been doing this thing. We've been doing this a lot. We've been using they, them a lot. However, I completely understand that it's a hard thing to kind of get around. My own child, I still struggle sometimes with he, because for 23 years I was using he, him. But they are giving me a break for knowing that it's not as easy. But I am not saying, oh, I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to, what do you mean? No, what I'm saying is I'm leaning in. I'm like, if that's what you want, give me some time. I give myself some time and we're going to get there. 42% of kids in the LGBTQ plus space seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months. Who can tell me in the chat why you think in the last 12 months in particular, why do you think this many children considered jumping, which is what I like to say instead? Let me see. What is that? Let me see.
My comment was from before your question, Dr. Lulu.
Yes.
I don't pretend to know why a child would want to complete a suicide. This is why I try to educate myself in a lot of this because I don't know. But I do know that a lot of the youth that I come in contact with honestly don't feel heard and or understood because they're not heard. And it is so easy to close your one mouth and open your 2 ears and keep your probably biased opinions to yourself. And I just speak for myself, but I speak to everyone out there. In my mind's eyes, an advocate is very similar to when someone shares about a sexual assault. the very last thing you want to do is open your mouth and say the wrong thing. It's almost better to just listen, because what can you say that will change it, undo it, or make it better? So I feel like when you're in a place of ignorance, because you just don't know what they're going to say, maybe it's better to just listen and let them talk. And then hopefully they can feel heard, at least maybe for the first time in their life. That's my guess.
And that's the power of coaching. A coach never does most of the talking. Most people just want a space where they can just vent and feel heard, and doing active listening. So just so I can understand you correctly, such and such and such, you know? And rather than saying, why do you want to kill yourself? Remember what I said, say, what happened? Because usually something happened. That's why suicides are usually a surprise, right? I just saw them last week and they were doing just fine. Yes, that's the problem. They were not doing so fine. But how are you doing? I'm fine. Because truly, how much time do you have? We looked at the ACEs. Sorry, was someone saying something?
Oh, yeah, Dr. Lulu, I was also going to add, I totally agreed with Rhea. And also, I'm Mexican, and I know in the Hispanic community, we don't really talk about the LGBTQ and their sexual preferences. There's still so much stigma around it. So helping normalize these conversations. I know my dad still struggles very much with understanding gay love and queer folk. And so I think just helping have these conversations, even though es muy difícil, we have to try.
Es verdad, pero no es más difícil que no podemos. You know what I mean?
Claro, claro que sí.
So no es más difícil que no podemos. Necesitamos tratar.
Sí.
And the beautiful thing about tratar is you're leaning in, and your brain will get it. Your subconscious will say, you know what? Okay, I give in, because you're going to insist in the conscious. Pero es verdad. That's why I love that Magdie's, and I don't know if you saw the clip of the CBS this morning. That's why I love that Magdie's parents were in there, and Magdie's mom spoke Spanish. It was important to me that people know that even las personas que están hispánicos, I'm not sure what the word is, also do accept their kids. And did you notice how their dad said they had an older child or another child who was also in the queer space? A lot of the parents in my Facebook group have multiple children in the queer space. Many of them have more than one child. And one of the things that people are saying is that the really, really intense homophobes out there have a secret. They're also queer. And their problem is, how dare you live your lives out loud? Es verdad, I didn't make it up. Look up every single thing I tell you. Please Google it and find out that it's true. Studies have shown. In the Washington Post, one of the times I wrote an article for the Post, the next article after mine was that many homophobes are actually closeted gays themselves. Pero por qué? So why are these kids suiciding? And by the way, words do matter. So we don't say commit. You will never hear me say commit suicide. You will always hear me say suicide as a verb. So people, why LGBT kids, suicide is a word, because suicide can be a verb and a noun, actually. Okay, so suicided is past tense. So you can say that, you can say died by suicide, you can say killed themselves, you can say completed is not quite as accepted anymore, but it's still better than committed. So you can still say completed. We don't say successful attempt, because there's nothing successful about that. We don't say failed attempt, because there's nothing failure. We just don't want to even invite that, if that makes any sense. All right. Then what you can do to help, become an ally. I mean, it's really, truly not very difficult to be an ally. Just tell yourself you're going to be an ally and talk. You are welcome to talk. And there's something called the OK app. I don't know if I have that on this talk. Oh, maybe I forgot to put that slide. Okay, we'll talk about that later on. So this is how to reach me. You can take a screenshot if you like. I think Rhea also posted in the comment section how to reach me also, but I thought I put that here. Okay, there it is. Yeah, the Not Okay app. Very good. So all those resources, the Trevor Project is one that's near and dear to my heart. That's their toll-free number there. They take care of LGBTQ+ youth and their loved ones. The the crisis text line, especially for the young ones who don't want to talk. And maybe you just don't want to talk, you just want to text 741. Literally, if you text anything, any combination of letters to 741, you will get a response. It's like calling 911. You can text start. I usually recommend to text help or text start. You can text Stephen, you can text home. So home and help are my two favorite ones that I like people to text. You can text talk, you can text anything to 741. There's an international hotline, but I forgot to add it. But this is the main hotline, 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-273-TALK, which is where I got my talk from. And the Not Okay app is such a cool app. So questions, anybody, everybody, thank you so much for the opportunity. As you can tell, I love to talk about this stuff. And I could literally, it took me everything to not add more slides. I was like, what can I take out and what can I add? So thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. My time is done. Don't forget to be kind and compassionate. Muchísimas gracias. So I'll take questions.
I have a question while folks are sending their praises and thank yous. What are all these languages you speak, my new friend? I am dying to know. I'm so intrigued as a language lover.
Oh, for the numbers, let me see. I'm sorry, I was just looking at the comments. They said that I should put the number. Oh Lord, I told y'all, don't give me this thing. I would not know what to do. I'll put the thing back.
It's okay. I could share the numbers. Hang on one second.
I think, okay, is it this one with the numbers, the 273 talk?
Yeah, there you go.
I wish it was this one you were talking about.
They have that in the chat already.
I left my phone number out. So my phone number is 802-768-1180. Yes, that is my cell phone number. I deal with people who are in an emergent or urgent place, so I don't care giving up my cell phone. So 802-768-1183. Please put it 1180. Please put it in the chat for me, my darling friend. But yes, so I speak, yes. So Nigeria has, I don't know how many languages. My mom is like, more than 300 languages. And I speak 5 of those. And most people don't realize that English is not my mother tongue. So English is one of my foreign languages that I speak. I speak it well, but it's a foreign language. I speak French, oui, je parle français, and I speak Spanish. So the other 5 are Nigerian languages. Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Efik, yes, all of those languages I speak fairly fluently. I love to be able to communicate, and I know that if you speak my language, you are a friend in all of your work. Thank you so much. Yes, 741. Yes. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. So here's the thing. Here's your homework, okay? When next you're thinking about a speaker, whether it's empowerment of youth or empowerment of women or immigrant health, or trauma in children, youth suicide, LGBTQ+ affairs, think about me, will you? Think about me. I think it's important to have what they call representation, right? So when people see people like them, it makes a difference. It makes a difference. Like I said at the beginning, I'm the one face from the motherland that's doing this work, that's supporting her child. I shouldn't be the only one. You should have other people, but it is what it is. So if you have a speaking engagement, just think about me. I'll give you a good deal. Wink, wink. All right, Rhi, my friend, thank you so much for the opportunity. I could talk forever. Every good thing must come to an end. All right, folks.
Correct. Thank you so much, Dr. Lulu. Go ahead, Dr. Ratliff.
No, I was just going to say, Dr. Lulu, thank you so much on behalf of the Active Minds chapter here at APUS. And thank you for the expertise as a mental health professional. I know that this is such a huge, important topic and really love the highlighting of LGBTQ+ specifically today. So thank you so much for bringing that just the passion and the expertise and the insight that I think the audience has really appreciated. So just wanted to thank you for that.
De nada.
All right, folks, thank you so much for attending this first session. We still have a whole lineup of wonderful presentations for the rest of the day. We will resume. I'll have the schedule up here during the break, and we will resume. Let me get the time. Basically in 30 minutes. Enjoy your break, and we have our very own Olivia Swarts presenting on the VAR, validate, appreciate, and refer. And you are going to, I don't know, this is a life-saving skill that you will obtain. So we hope to see you back in about 30 minutes. Thank you.
Bye. Ree, can I leave or do I stay? I'm not sure. What am I doing? Yes. Okay.
Recording.
Alrighty then.
All right, thank you to those in attendance or those listening later. Welcome to the second session of the second day of our symposium. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Miss Olivia Swarts, who is going to do a presentation on Active Minds tool of validate, appreciate, and refer, also called VAR. So a little bit about Olivia before she gets started. She is currently the media master of our APUS Active Minds chapter, and she has been involved in the chapter actually since 2020. As a recent graduate of APUS, she greatly values the work of the Active Minds chapter and its meaningful pursuits. She is passionate about spreading mental health awareness and actually previously represented our organization at the Building an Inclusive Community webinar, where she also spoke on mental health awareness. Ms. Swarts recently graduated with her BA in psychology and wishes to pursue a career in the mental health field. She divides her time between working as a research assistant, tutoring math, and a mental health coordinator. When she is not busy working, she also volunteers at 7 Cups as a trained listener and student intern. She is an officer at 2 other APUS organizations as well, and she greatly values her position here at APUS Active Minds and continues to learn more by working with our wonderful organization. And as chapter president, I can say we could not have a better media master. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and share her presentation. She will be on live after the presentation for a Q&A, but I will share, she happens to be on the other side of the world in lovely South Africa. So we don't want to stress the internet connection. So she actually was gracious enough to record her session for us so we can just play the video, and then she will again be available for Q&A.
Hello everyone, my name is Olivia Swarts and I'm an officer at the APUS Active Minds chapter. First, I want to extend a very warm welcome to you all for joining us at our presentation on VAR. With that, let's get started. Now you might be asking yourself, what is VAR? Validate, appreciate, refer. To begin, we'll watch a video from Active Minds.
Hey, has this ever happened to you? Maybe a friend, teammate, coworker, loved one says something like, I've been having a hard time lately. I've been feeling really anxious. I'm overwhelmed. If it sounds like more than a bad day, it probably is. So What could you do? Consider this an opening to start a conversation with your friend. Talk and listen using VAR. Validate, appreciate, refer. VAR. An easy way to let someone know it's okay to not be okay, and you are not alone.
So, what do you say when you're just not sure? This can be a complicated thing to discuss. I mean, a friend comes to you, they need your help, and what do you say? That's where VAR comes in, and this is an extremely helpful tool. But first, let's look at some of the statistics. 76% of young adults turn to a friend first when they are struggling. 61% of students do not feel prepared to help a friend who shares their struggle, and 39% of students in college experience a significant mental health issue. Mental health struggles are on the rise globally, particularly among young adults. Suicide remains the second leading cause of death among young adults, including those on college campuses nationwide. You can help. But let's also remember that mental health and mental illness does not discriminate. Suicidal thoughts, stress, and overall mental health struggles can happen to anybody. How to best show up for our friends. A conversation can be life-changing. For many, they just need to feel supported. It can be challenging though. How do you know what exactly to say when someone tells you they're stressed or having a difficult day or struggling with their mental health? VAR, or validate, appreciate, refer, empowers people to know what to say and do in those moments. The 3 steps are a helpful guide to listening and responding in a meaningful way. You can also teach other people VAR so that their conversations are also rooted in active listening skills and validation. Validation can make all the difference in the world. With that, let's start with the first step. Validate. Validate their feelings. Let them know that what they're feeling is okay and that you believe them. When someone reaches out to you, validate their feelings and acknowledge that whatever they are going through is okay. Even if you cannot relate to what they are going through, remember, this is real to them. Validation can sound like, that makes sense. That sounds difficult. You have a lot on your plate. I believe you. I hear you. What are some examples of validation you can think of? Drop them in the chat and let's go through them. The next step is appreciate. Appreciate their courage. Speaking up can be a challenging step, and let them know it's a good one. You can use this opportunity to let them know you care and that they are not alone. Appreciate can sound like, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being open with me. I'm here if you want to talk or need anything. You are not alone. It helps to know what you are going through. What are some other examples you can think of? The final step is refer. Refer them to skills and support. Let them know that help is available and refer them to the appropriate resources. Sometimes what a person needs is a listening ear and a social connection. Sometimes they will need more. And you can help to figure out what will work best for them in this moment. Notice, refer is best when posed as a question. Refer can sound like, what makes you feel truly cared for? What's one thing that you would make a difference for you in this moment? Do you think it might be helpful to talk to someone? I can go with you. Do you want to make plans to go on a run together tomorrow? What are some other examples you can think of that you can use in this step. Refer, taking it a step further. In certain cases, the need for support is greater than what self-care or coping strategies can take care of. You may suggest your campus counseling center or a mental health professional and ask your friend how that would feel to them. You can even offer to go with them so that they know you are there to support them and that they are not alone. If your friend is in crisis, stay with them until they are able to connect with immediate help. You can also find some of those resources on this website. Remember that this conversation may be ongoing. Following up with the person the next day or soon is always a good idea. Refer is always in a form of a question. It is important to use this step to learn from the person what is most helpful for them. Now you might be wondering, are there things I shouldn't say or do when someone opens up to me? Yes. Be careful not to minimize or judge what they are going through, and try not to fix or solve their challenges without fully hearing them out and validating their feelings. Use caution when trying to relate what they are going through. You may not know the full context, and we are all unique and experience situations differently. You might also be wondering, I'm worried I'm going to say the wrong thing. What can I do to make sure I don't? And what if I'm not qualified to support someone who is struggling? This is totally valid. It can be intimidating to step into the arena of showing up for people in this way. VAR is all about just being there for the people around us and helping them understand that they are not alone. It's not being an expert, and a lot of time, a friendly, non-judgmental person is exactly what will help someone through the challenging moments in life. It is less about what you say and more about you being present and showing that you care. How can I ask someone to use VAR with me when I need to share something that I'm going through and want to be heard and validated? This is a great question. You deserve to be heard and validated too. Here are a few ways you can ask for what you need around communication. Hey, I have something on my mind. Is it okay if I just vent for a minute? I don't really need advice or anything. I just need to get it off my chest, and it would be super helpful if you were willing to listen. And it is always a good idea to thank them for being a listener after you've finished sharing. Here's another example. You know, I really appreciate your advice and insights, but right now it would really help me if I could just share my thoughts. Would that be okay? I'd love to hear your thoughts afterwards. There are 2 more examples on this page that you can look at. And why don't you come up with a few examples on your own? Share them in the chat box. Now, what do you do when someone expresses that they are really struggling or that they are considering hurting themselves? This can be an extremely difficult situation. And if you know someone who is in danger of hurting themselves or others, it is important to find them the support they need as soon as possible. You can visit the website above for immediate crisis support resources. Here are a few examples. You can text a crisis text line, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, go to the emergency room at a local hospital, call 911, or call campus security. There are a few do's and don'ts of VAR. Let's go through them. Do use caution when relating to the experience. You may not know the full context. The problem is, in certain cases, when people try to relate to an experience, it may seem like you're minimizing what they are going through. You must ask what you need in a conversation. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need. Seek help if you are concerned that you or someone you know is in danger of hurting themselves or others. Don't minimize or judge what they are going through. Don't try to fix or solve their challenge. This may sound like if someone's having difficulty with their work-life balance and you tell them, oh, you should just develop better time management skills. This would minimize and judge what they're going through. And while you're trying to help fix or solve their challenge, it may not come off the best or be helpful to them. Don't try to be an expert. It is enough to be present and show you care. You don't need to be an expert to help. You just need to be there. And listen to those words. They are so important and they can really make the difference in someone's life. I want to thank you all for being here today and listening to our presentation. And I hope you take VAR out into the world and use it with your friends and teach them to use it with you.
And now, Miss Olivia.
Thank you everyone for listening to the presentation. I really feel so passionate about using this tool. It's come in handy so many times. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat box. I'll answer them momentarily. First, I want to share a personal experience of how I have had to use VAR. As you mentioned, I am also a tutor and I sometimes work with teenagers. And it's such a special population to work with, and you can truly see when someone's struggling. And recently a student reached out to me and they said they wanted to talk to me, and we had a conversation and I truly used these VAR techniques and it truly helped them open up, and it ended up that they needed immediate help. It was a crisis situation like referred to in the presentation, and ended up getting that help. And I'm so grateful to the VAR technique because I really feel that that helped that student to open up to me, help them feel comfortable, and it really helped the overall situation. Because in those situations, it can be so difficult to figure out what to say. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to be too pushy. You want to encourage them to share. And you also just want to make sure that you express that gratitude. So I truly believe that this tool has great potential and it's so easy to learn. You can use it in your day-to-day life. You can use it with friends, you can use it at work, you can use it if anyone comes to you and they're struggling and they just want to share. So I really hope that you all can take this tool away and use it in your everyday lives.
Wonderful. Thank you for that great example. Olivia did open it up if anyone, during the video, she had said put things in the chat. I was wondering if anyone has heard of VAR or can think of examples where you've had to possibly intervene with the tools that you did have at the time, either directly intervene and help with a suicide prevention, or just simply sit in silence with someone. We wanted to open up this time to have people share experiences or wisdoms that they have as well. And while you guys are thinking, I wanted to share a little story. I've actually been personally involved in 3 suicide preventions. Unfortunately, when my grandfather took his own life, I was not as educated as I am now. And so did not have the tools then that I have now. But since then, one was facilitated via Facebook of all things. And it was really kind of neat because it was a high school friend who had essentially posted a goodbye post and then deleted it within about 5 minutes. And as one who's rarely on Facebook, I happened to catch that message and tried to reach out to her. Well, what ended up happening is because she lives out in Las Vegas, which is near California, we were able to rally folks who live in the city and found someone who knew her and sent her, and they went to her house and were able to catch her actually before she took an entire bottle of pills, which was her planned method. So while I couldn't directly use VAR, what I did do was coach the friend who was going to her house. And of course, we called 911 and such. And I'm happy to report that this friend is still alive today, and has sought mental health counseling to deal with the trauma that she was experiencing at the time. So while social media, it's good and bad, it is a way to help, I guess, encourage, right, Olivia? I think that's the word, right? Validate and appreciate what they're saying as well. Does anyone else have anything to share? My pleasure. I'm sorry, I forgot to turn on the video. Meant to do that. Miss Olivia, I would love to see your face too, ma'am. While we see if anyone has any other ideas, what I wanted to share too is, you all may have heard of Brene Brown. She has a wonderful video out there on empathy, which I do plan to put in the chat. And I'm going to post another few things that Olivia had referenced in the chat as well for your clicking. And also someone had asked earlier if we are recording these sessions. We are, and they will be put on our YouTube channel, which I just put in the chat there, as well as the VAR reference that Olivia mentioned is also on there. And then I'm also going to put the Active Minds YouTube, the Active Minds National YouTube in the chat, just for your reference. Since we are an Active Minds chapter of our university, we are in the fight to stamp out the stigma and change the conversation, right? Olivia, do you have anything else to add while I'm putting these links in here for everybody?
Yeah, I think truly those final words of the presentation, you don't need to be an expert you just need to be there. And I just really believe that everyone needs to truly listen to those words and realize it's, also your situation, how you explained, helping your friend. You weren't an expert, but you were there, and that was life-changing. And really just shows the power of a conversation.
Yeah, for sure. One of the other times I had to, I hate to say intervene, but I mean, intervention is the word. A friend called me and she expressed she was having thoughts of suicide and planning it out. And all I could do was stay on the phone, which is something Dr. Lulu mentioned in the earlier presentation, because you're there, right? Sometimes they just need someone there and they reach out because they need someone to be there. So the last thing I was going to do is be like, oh, can I call you later? In fact, I was incredibly busy and I stopped everything to just stay on the phone with her. So I am in no way a professional, right? We leave being a professional to the professionals. And that's the glory of VAR, is you don't have to be a professional to validate someone as their feelings are being what they are. You don't have to be a professional to appreciate them or appreciate that they shared with you. And that's why my comment is, thank you for trusting me enough to share, because trust is so important. And it's not always easy to earn, but it sure is easy to lose, right? And then of course, referring to a professional should they need it, or just refer them to anyone that can help, especially if they're a little bit further away. It's so important.
Yeah, definitely. I really think that this tool can be useful in anyone's hands, you know, like you say, refer to the professionals, but not professionals can still help. And I think that's the beauty of VAR. We don't have to be experts, but we can still help.
Dr. Ratliff, are you going to share wisdom?
Yeah, I was just going to wrap it up just a little bit before I know your session, Rhi, that's upcoming in the next few minutes. As Olivia and Rhi have so eloquently said, you know, even if you're not a mental health professional, there's something you can do. And this is a community problem. It's not just a mental health issue. And so there are so many situations that can enter someone's life that puts them in a spinning, you know, cycle of having thoughts of suicide. And when those things happen, I love how both of them just really reiterated just how important it is to be there and to have a tool, have a plan of how you address things. And sometimes, like Olivia's presentation shared, sometimes it's just a matter of someone's having a really bad day and they just need support in whatever way. But if it does lead into more suicidal thoughts and something that's more serious in nature, you know, being able to refer and get them to that support is so important. And a lot of times all that takes is, hey, I'm going to go with you. Let me go with you. I know a counselor on such and such street. I'll take you there. Or if you're on a college campus, let me walk you to the counseling center. You know, getting them to that support and help. And I think the emergency numbers and the crisis lines and those things that are available as well, making sure you have those things on hand so that they're readily available and you don't have to go searching for them, so that for long-term support, you can provide those to whoever needs it in that moment, and they can keep it on their mirror or on their refrigerator or, you know, wherever is a prominent place that they know that they can reach out to some people for support. So thank you both, Olivia and Rhi, you know, for sharing that and sharing that side of things. I think sometimes when people think of suicide, they start to get nervous about, oh, I'm not a professional. But guess what? We can all do something about it, even if you are not a professional in this field.
Dr. Ratliff, I appreciate you sharing about maybe walking someone to a counseling center. So I am a mental health professional as well. At our practice, we are not a crisis practice, and so we do refer out when necessary. However, another thing, I'm not sure how it is in different states, but in Washington State, I'm based out of Seattle, we in our urgent cares, they can walk in. So that's another option too for folks. If they are in a major crisis, they can go to their nearest urgent care for help.
Yes, that's very true. One thing to keep in mind, though, a lot of times hospital emergency rooms are another place. However, there's a significant cost with that. So you just want to be sure we're not putting financial burden if you're going into an actual emergency room. So just keep that in mind. So the urgent care might be another option there. I'm in Washington State as well, Lizette. That's awesome.
Oh, yay. Hello, shout out.
Yes.
All right, got some Washington love. All right, well, Miss Olivia, did you have any closing remarks before we end this session for a short break?
No, I think the tool is what I want to leave everyone with, and that you don't need to be an expert. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing and letting us have this conversation. I truly feel it's so important. And that's one thing I truly value about Active Minds.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Isn't she wonderful?
Thank you.
We're going to give her a hand. We love her so much. And again, I always emphasize that she's in South Africa, one, because I love her accent as a lover of accents, but also because sometimes some of our events, it's the middle of the night for her, yet she shows up anyway. That's how dedicated she is. So thank you, Miss Olivia. All right, everyone, we are going to have just a short break this time, just a 15-minute break. We do believe in self-care, and so we like to get up and stretch our bones. When we come back, I'm going to lead us in just a short self-care breathing exercise, because a lot of people honestly just don't understand how to stop and take a breath. I am a total hypocrite. I know it and I don't do it enough, which is why I signed up to force myself to do it today. So we will see you back at, well, it's 13:15 here. So at 15 after, whatever time zone you're in, we'll see you back. Thank you. With the recording, we'll go.
Okay, welcome back from that break. We have a very, very special mini presentation with Rhiannon. We call her Rhi Brown, who's the current president of the American Public University System Active Minds Chapter. Say that 5 times fast. She has served as an officer of this chapter since 2017 and loves knowing that her efforts make a difference to someone somewhere. Rhi is a self-professed whole person life advocate. She's a survivor across the board. She views each soul as one in need and agrees that hurt people hurt people. Keeping that in mind, she focuses on helping others find the root cause of their behavior and uses empathy, wisdom, and active listening to help them learn to advocate for themselves. Ms. Brown loves to educate, edify, and empower others. Together with her son Isaiah, she is starting a podcast entitled Be the Different. They will share testimonies, stories, and adventures while making memories, speaking to parent-children dynamics, and hopefully helping draw families closer by discussing the tough subjects with both a parent and child perspective. Her mantra is knowledge is power, a truth she lives by as she focuses on what she can do with this knowledge and influence in this space for this challenge in this moment. To quote some wise words, Rhi always says, I am the one thing in life I can control. I am amenable. And I was like, oh.
Hamilton.
Yeah, I almost said the wrong word. Inimitable, I am an original, and so are you. You matter. So Rhi, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know that was just mean to put that word in there, but I love that word. So what can I say? All right, so hopefully you can see the video here. As a self-professed advocate, like I said, to include those with disabilities, I am not shy about the fact that I have narcolepsy. So we were kind of giggling earlier about the fact that box breathing I do well, meditation I don't, I just fall asleep. But what we're going to focus on for this session is actually mindful breathing. And one sample of that is called box breathing. So what I'm going to share first is just a small video to explain how to do the box breathing so that I can do it along with you rather than talking through it. And then I'm going to let another professional from the American Lung Association take us through a wonderful breathing exercise. And then we will end it with just a couple of more different styles of breathing that we can do, because you can do this in the bathroom, you could, do it on a walk, you can do it while you're driving. So anytime that you're feeling like it's just too much, you're breathing anyway, might as well make it intentional, healthy breathing. So that's what we're going to do today. So once I click play, if you can just give me a thumbs up so I know you can hear. And let's start our breathing.
There are times when we all experience feelings of stress or anxiety. In these moments, you can use your breath to help calm those feelings. Box breathing is a simple relaxation technique that can help you reset your breath and return to its normal rhythm. You can do it anywhere, anytime. Box breathing can help reduce stress and improve mood. It can also help with controlling and managing emotions. It's very easy to learn. Imagine breathing around a box. Inhale as you visualize going up one side of the box. gradually filling your lungs with air. When you reach the top, hold your breath for 1 to 5 seconds as you picture going across the top of the box. Exhale gradually as you imagine traveling down the other side of the box. Pause again for 1 to 5 seconds as you go along the bottom of the box. Then repeat. This can be done 7 to 10 times in a row, focusing on the breath. If you can do it sitting down with your feet grounded, that will help too. But really, it can be done anywhere. Box breathing has physiological and psychological benefits. Physiologically, it regulates breath, increases oxygen to the lungs, and can help reduce blood pressure and lower heart rate. Box breathing can help psychologically by providing focus to your breath and removing attention from the things that are causing feelings of stress and anxiety. The repetition of box breathing can also help reduce stress. So, in moments when feelings of stress and anxiety are overwhelming, remember box breathing and the power of your breath as a simple way to relax and breathe a bit easier.
So just taking a moment to check in with the body. That is, making sure that the shoulders are relaxed, that the arms and hands have a place to rest comfortably. And taking in a nice gentle inhalation and letting it go with a sigh. Once again, taking in a slightly deeper but gentle inhalation through the nostrils and again letting it go through the mouth. Perhaps already beginning to feel a sense of softness in the body. So we'll move our attention into the body to release trapped energy and move deeper into total relaxation. Starting with the lower half of the body, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to take in an inhalation, and I want you to create some deliberate stiffness and stretching in the parts of the body that I mentioned. So again, inhaling and deliberately tightening the feet, the legs, the knees, the thighs, the buttocks, the tummy, whole lower half of the body. Hold, hold, tighten, tighten, and now let go. And on the next exhalation, letting go even more. And observe the flood of energy in the legs. And next we'll work with the upper part of the body. As you inhale, again, making it deep and hold, tightening the fists, the arms, the shoulders, the chest, the back, the neck, the face, the head. Tighten, tighten more completely. And now let go. And on the next exhalation, letting go completely. Observing the flood of energy in your arms, and face and head. And this time, we'll work with the entire body. Taking a longer but softer inhalation if you can. And as you hold, tightening the feet, the legs, the knees, the thighs, the buttocks, tummy, chest, back, shoulders, hands, arms, face, neck, head, whole body, tighten, tighten as long as you can, and then let go. On the next exhalation, letting go even more. Observing the feel and flood of energy, extending to all muscles, nerves and cells, the entire body. Just let your whole body melt into the flood of energy that you feel. Let the whole body go limp. Rest in the silence. And slowly feeling yourself as you deepen the breath, rising back to the surface of awareness. Awareness of the physical body, and how well the chair or floor support you. The sounds of the room, the air in the room, and how it touches your face. And as you feel the impulse beginning to move, perhaps stretching the body as if awakening from a restful nap, when you're ready, open your eyes. Thank you for joining us for this practice. If you'd like to know more, go to lung.org or call our lung helpline. Breathe easy. Namaste.
All right, if you haven't fallen asleep, we have 2 more minutes. We're going to do a little bit more box breathing just to continue our mindful breathing. So I'll go ahead and inhale. And hold the breath in your lungs. And exhale. And hold it out. And inhale. And hold it. Exhale. And hold it. Another thing you can do on inhale is inhale and feel all the breath go down into your diaphragm. You don't have to hold it in your chest. Just let it sink down. Hold it there. And this time when you exhale, you can do an audible like when you exhale, you can let the sound out, let the tension out. Inhale. And hold. Exhale. And inhale one more time. And exhale. All right, hopefully, if you're still awake, I'm proud of myself, I stayed awake. Hopefully you were able to participate in that mindfulness breathing. It's just one way to practice good self-care. I will say that I do this at red lights. It's better to focus on healthy breathing than focus on the fact that I'm probably hot because I'm in Texas and at a red light. Another time I'll do it is during meetings, gives me something to focus on. And I don't fall asleep because I'm standing in the back of a meeting, right? If you have children and they're frustrating you, instead of saying something you probably will regret later, one thing you could do is step away and practice mindful breathing. So here at Active Minds, once again, we do promote self-care in that one thing Dr. Lulu said earlier is the loudest voice in your head is normally yours. And so we try to remember that that voice has a lot of power. So we want to have positive self-talk and we want to practice self-care. And within self-care, one great and easy way to love on your body is to do mindful breathing. So hopefully you got something out of that. I did share all of the videos, the one from the American Lung Association, also the one from, was a hospital, Sunnybrook Hospital. And also I'm going to go ahead and put this Zen meditation music, if you like that, just for some nice soft music while you're doing your breathing. And with that, I will close out this short session. It was meant to be short. We have the wonderful Dr. Jody Adewale coming up at 2 o'clock. So we will now start our normal 30-minute break, and we will see you back in 30 minutes. Thank you. There we go. And so I'll go ahead and welcome you back to our, what is this, third or fourth session of the day, of day 2 of our annual Suicide Prevention and Awareness Symposium. So welcome back, or welcome via recording. I have the sound pleasure of introducing one of my favorite people, even though I barely know him. That's how amazing he is. And just because I have an extra minute, I'm going to share how I connected with Dr. Adewale. A couple of years ago, I was watching the Surviving R. Kelly series. I think it was Netflix. And he was just so profound in what he shared. I was like, you know what? I totally live by the motto is all they can say is no. And I Googled him and I found his email and I emailed and I was like, hey, good sir, such a great job on the show. I'm, part of a mental health chapter in my university. I would be honored if you would present at one of our member meetings. And he was like, sweet, I'm there. That was it. It was amazing. So if you're ever wondering what they might say, just know they might say yes. And all you have to do is ask. So with that, I will start by introducing Dr. Jody Adewale is a licensed clinical psychologist in Los Angeles, California. And he is the owner of Adewale Psychological Services. And he treats adults and adolescents with clinical, behavioral, emotional, substance abuse, and family issues. He uses various psychological methods to maximize an individual's potential while improving their mental health. He is also an adjunct professor of psychology at East Los Angeles College, and he teaches biological, clinical, developmental, social, and introductory psychology courses. He has authored 2 books, Absent Fathers, which is exploring the impact of an absent father has on a child or adult's perception, and another called Who Can Curly Trust, which is a children's book explaining therapy and confidentiality. Dr. Adewale works with amateur athletes, professional athletes in the NFL, and athletic organizations to improve performance and increase mental health stability. He was a running back at University of Southern California, go Trojans, from 2003 to 2008, and winning 2 national championships and 5 Pac-10 titles. He has been featured on television shows, radio, and in documentaries, including Surviving R. Kelly, Coaching Bad, Flex and Shanice, and Karen Hunter XM Radio. And with that, I will put his contact information in the chat and take it away, good sir.
Thank you very much, Rhi. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate you telling how you met me. You know, when I started off my practice, I was helping a veterinarian move out of the office, and I asked him, what's the secret to like starting and running a good practice? He said, answering your phone and just saying yes. He said, that's it. If you can do that, you'll have a good practice. So thank you for that. Welcome everyone. Again, my name is Dr. Jody Adewale. You can call me Jody if you like. I'd love if you feel comfortable to unmute yourself and talk or ask questions, or if you have a comment, feel free just to unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat. I don't want you to feel like I'm just lecturing you for a whole hour. I'd love your comments or your thoughts. So welcome. Today, we're going to be discussing how suicide and mental health factors play a role within BIPOC communities. So in terms of specifically for this discussion, mental health issues are heavily related to suicidal ideation, suicide attempts. It's not everyone that kills themselves has a mental health issue. You know, not everyone who completes suicide has a mental health issue, but the majority, I'm gonna say upwards of 95%, is related to some type of mental health issue. So my focus today, or our focus today, is gonna be specifically related to mental health and suicide in the BIPOC communities, not those outlier factors where people take their life for other sociological reasons. So today's topic, today's what we're going to cover, how stigma plays a role in mental health, especially with BIPOC communities. What are some of the risk factors, and what are the rates of suicide in completion and ideation or attempts in BIPOC communities? We're also going to go over some theories surrounding why people take their lives. What are the factors that lead to taking their lives? Two that I researched, one that I created on my own, and ways to create a safety plan and ways to support yourself if you have had suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation, support loved ones, or supporting patients that you might see in the future. All right. There's one theory out there, I think it's a psychoanalytic. It talks about how we all, every single one of us, has a life instinct, eros, and a death instinct, thanatos. You know, eros, thanatos. Every living creature, every bacteria, everything on this planet that's alive has a life instinct and a death instinct. And sometimes suicidal thoughts or suicidal attempts are triggered by this death instinct that is triggered by some external stressor. It could be substance abuse, could be family stress, could be work, could be feelings of helplessness. But the idea of that we all have this life and death instinct says that we're all capable of having suicidal thoughts, that everyone on this planet has the potential to be suicidal at one point or another. So in saying that, I just wanted to let you know that this information might be relevant for your work, but also might be relevant for you if it is. Mm-hmm. So people sometimes look at this word BIPOC and they don't know what it means. Like, what does BIPOC mean? BIPOC is sort of, it describes Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So you'll hear me using this word throughout the presentation. So just remind yourself, BIPOC means Black, Indigenous, or people of color. You know, so suicide rates in the United States, specifically the United States, in BIPOC communities, they differ heavily by ethnicity, race, sexual orientation. And it's not as easy to just look at BIPOC as a whole and say, you know, BIPOC people have this many suicide rates or this many suicide attempts. There's so many different ethnicities and sexual orientations and genders that it's more complex than just one group. It's a group of, 50 groups, it's a groups inside groups. But there are some general risk factors that increase mental health challenges and potentially suicidal thoughts or actions within BIPOC communities. One is the experience of racism. In the United States, specifically the United States, people of color have had micro and macro aggressions put upon them. And this creates a form of trauma that sometimes gets unaddressed and gets internalized as a part of an identity. So racism, higher unemployment rates, some financial insecurity can also create mental health challenges, as well as lack of access to mental health treatment. This is something we're going to talk about a lot today, how access to treatment is a potential positive factor or a protective factor for people who are in the BIPOC community, but who might be struggling with mental health issues leading to suicidal thoughts. So rates differ in the BIPOC community depending on ethnicity, gender, orientation, age, but they all share risk factors: racism, unemployment, financial stress, lack of mental health support. So in terms of BIPOC communities, I believe you can generalize in this way and say many BIPOC communities have stigma and lack of access to care. One of the main factors in the BIPOC communities are the stigma associated with accessing care. I can tell you, a lot of my friends, African American, Latino, they think what I do as a psychologist, they go, that's stupid. Why do you even do that? Why do even people talk to you? People talk to you for an hour and they pay you? What? That's stupid. So a lot of my friends tell me that. In our communities, talking about your problems or addressing or accepting that there's a mental health challenge there often gets missed or pushed away. So we're going to focus a little bit on stigma and talk about how if you have stigma and you don't have access, you're isolated. You're put on an island, and your mental health challenges can get worse and lead you to a potential suicidal attempt or just suicidal thoughts. Some of the concerns in the BIPOC group, some of the concerns again are stigma, limited access. Another major concern is a lot of providers don't reflect the community they serve. I can't tell you how many patients have come to see me and talked about they just wanted a minority therapist because they felt more comfortable and they felt like they would understand. I would understand, or someone that reflected them would understand. I remember one person said to me, I told my therapist that people were following me in the store and she thought I was psychotic. And she was like, no, like every time I go in the store as a Black woman, people follow me and they look and they look around the corners. And I could understand that because I've experienced that and I could talk to her about it, but she felt so discouraged that her therapist didn't understand that. And she said even taxi drivers don't pick me up, and the therapist thought it was some kind of delusion. So finding more therapists or culturally competent therapists in the communities can help improve access and decrease some of the stigma around mental health in the BIPOC communities. Another major factor, sociological factors, there's a lack of funding for mental health for BIPOC communities. There's not enough resources out there, and the ones that are, they're not being utilized. There's also a lot of police involvement in mental health issues that are nonviolent. We'll talk about this a little later, but it's my belief that nonviolent mental health issues we need to decrease the police involvement in it. Let's say you see someone, half naked walking down the street because they're delusional or gravely disabled, we call the police right away. I think we need a team of social workers, psychiatrists, mental health professionals, psychologists connected with law enforcement that get sent out to help BIPOC communities who are struggling with mental health issue. If you, a lot of people especially African American, Latino, especially, the only treatment they get sometimes is when they get arrested. And if you are only getting psychiatric mental health treatment when you're in jail, there's a natural association between the two. You're going to associate them, jail, mental health. And there might be, when you get out, an aversion to seeking mental health treatment. So I think we need to decriminalize mental health struggles. Suicide in itself is a crime in the United States, which doesn't make sense to me. We criminalize this act, and I think we need to look at it more as a mental health challenge, just as we looked at drug abuse as a mental health challenge and less as a criminal act. We look at suicide in the same way. So BIPOC groups, the groups within the groups, some of the research suggests that BIPOC individuals are less likely to have access to mental health services and less likely to seek out mental health services on their own. They're not really, if the services aren't there and they're not really reaching out for them. If they do access mental health treatment, the chances that they're going to get some low quality, poor quality mental health service is high. They might, oftentimes they go to these community organizations where they're understaffed and overworked. and the mental health treatment, it has a good foundation and there's a good motive behind it, but the delivery of the treatment often gets, flawed because the clinicians have just too many clients. The organization doesn't have enough money or funding to support the type of treatment that's needed. One of my friends in San Diego, he's a psychologist for the county, and he told me he had 132 patients. That was his caseload, and he wanted to report it to the board of psychology because he's like, that's just ridiculous. He's like, I can't provide good treatment for 132 people. Yeah, and another factor that research suggests is that BIPOC groups are more likely to end services early or permanently than Caucasian groups, due to all these factors, due to the stigma, due to the hoops that you have to jump through to get the treatment, due to the quality of treatment that you get when you do get it. Oftentimes BIPOC individuals are like, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. This is a waste of my time. Yeah. So all these factors do lead to exacerbated mental health symptoms and potentially suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation. Talking about stigma, there is in BIPOC communities, I can speak for at least Black communities too, sometimes when you have a mental health challenge, it's perceived as a character defect or a lack of morality or a weakness. Strength is a key factor for BIPOC communities. Strength through adversity. You can read any textbook on African American history. Harriet Tubman's biography, Frederick Douglass. In none of those books does it say, oh, they African Americans gave up and they quit and that was it. Never. There's an idea of strength in African American and Asian and Native American and Latino cultures that we carry around with us. And to accept that something has gone wrong with my psyche or I need mental health support contradicts that perception of strength or that identity of strength. And it's easier to suppress and run away from the mental health challenge than it is to address it because of the cognitive dissonance. Also, in BIPOC communities, you'll see a lot of self-blame when it comes to a mental health challenge. Like, it's your fault, you're not doing this, you're not doing it right. How come you got to this point? What did you do? Especially when it comes to substance abuse, we look at people in the community, BIPOC communities, like, oh, they're just amoral and they're lazy and they should have never taken drugs. More often, mental health professionals address these issues with caring and compassion and disassociate it from your character or your morality or who's to blame. It's more, how can we help? So BIPOC communities really struggle, I think, with self-blame, character defects, morality, lack of, not that they struggle with this, but when it comes to mental health challenges, they struggle to manage the two, to balance the two. If I have a mental health challenge, does that mean I have a character flaw? No, it is totally separate. All right. Some common barriers, the research also shows that some common barriers for BIPOC community has to do a lot with their fears. I've had patients come to me, and African American, Latino, were worried about how seeing me as their therapist was going to impact their job. And I remember one told me, if I talk to you about this stuff, will I not be able to get a job in the future? And I was like, no, this is confidential. So some of the common fears are, how is it going to impact my employment? If I'm suicidal, will they take away my rights? Will they not let me in the military? Will they not let me have access to defense, like a firearm? You'll also see many patients worried about confidentiality, that this isn't confidential. How do I know it's confidential? How do I know you're not going to tell my family? So these are some common fears that you'll see in the BIPOC community. You also see that there's the fear how their social group will respond. If they know, if my friends or my mom found out I was in therapy, they'd make fun of me or they would treat me different. So you'll see a lot of that in the BIPOC community as well. And a common fear too I call it healthy paranoia. It's the mistreatment of BIPOC individuals in history by medical and mental health professionals. You've seen I don't want to go, I could go through many cases, but you've seen medical and mental health, and psychology has misused BIPOC groups for many years. There was the psychology, the American Psychological Association just put out basically an apology recently for the field of psychology on how it's mistreated minorities in our culture. An example of this is Henrietta Lacks. She had cancer and she passed away. Her cancer cells are still alive today. There's been tons of research on it, on her cells. Her cells have been used to, help treat other cancer patients. But all this was done without her consent. Her family has gotten no compensation for any of it. Her name is often not even mentioned as another example of how a Black woman was taken advantage of by a system, and this creates distrust. You'll see with vaccines, a lot of people are afraid, they distrust getting vaccines. So it's understandable, but this is a hurdle that I believe we need to jump over and get over.
Dr. Jody, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
From the previous slide regarding like the military, for example, as a common fear, as mandated reporters, where would you say is a fine line between reporting that maybe someone in the service is suicidal or is it, has a plan? At which point is it feasible to breach confidentiality versus not?
Yeah. So there is what you have to do as a professional, so if someone in the military tells me, I'm thinking about ending my life, I'm not going to jump to hospitalize right away. We're gonna talk about it for a little bit, and we're gonna ask, does he have means? Does he have intent? Does he have a plan? And then as it gets more serious in my mind, that's when I'm like, okay, your military service is second, your life is first. But I'm more careful when addressing people in the military due to its impact that it might have on their, enlistment, or So that's a thin line you need to walk down, but always go with your ethics ahead of the patient's fears. I would always go with your ethics, but make sure you tread lightly. If they have intent, plans, and means, and they tell you, hey, I'm going to kill myself after the session, hospitalize or right away, break confidentiality. Yeah. But I would also have these discussions with them early on in this first, second session. I would tell them right away, these are some factors that can potentially interfere with your service. Is it diagnosis? I've had patients who I didn't diagnose because that diagnose through their insurance company would stick, and it would interfere with their military service. Just treat it as like a counseling session with no clinical diagnosis. So yeah, I say be flexible, but rule of thumb, always go with your ethics. Always go with the laws and rules in your community. So hopefully that answers.
Awesome. So helpful. Yeah, absolutely. So helpful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. So I didn't go too far back, but I looked at research for creating this presentation from 2014 to 2019. And the research suggests that Black individuals in the United States have a 30% increased rate of suicides from 2014 to 2019. And Asian Pacific Islander individuals have had a 16% increase in suicide rates between 2014 and 2019. There's many reasons. I mean, there's no this is a reason for this, but there's theories around it. There's theories that suggest that there's more income inequality in the United States. It's just getting worse and worse. And this income inequality is creating more stressors for BIPOC communities. I think the increased amount of stress, if any of you aren't stressed, I would love for you to tell me how you're doing it, because most of us are struggling with some level of stress or not. And then you throw on the factors of racism, of income inequality, of not having a job, of substance abuse, of community violence. It's just I think a recipe for mental health challenges that will lead into potential suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation. You've also seen, I've had patients in the past year, Asian American AAPI patients who have had trauma responses due to what they see in the media of Asians getting attacked on the street, like out of nowhere, And so sometimes seeing other people's trauma can trigger trauma inside of you and turn on that thanatos. You know, the fear of just walking down the street can create mental health challenges for yourself. So in looking at the suicide rates from 2010 to 2019, on average, like overall, the highest suicide, like the group with the highest suicide rates are Native American and Alaskan Natives. This blue line right here, those are the highest rates, followed by Caucasians in the United States. Those are the Native American, Alaskan Native highest rates, followed by Caucasian. Asian American, Latino, African American, they're a little lower, but you're seeing that the rates are starting to rise. You're seeing that people are starting to consider taking their lives more seriously now than they were in the past. What's interesting here on this from the Suicide Prevention Resource Center was some data that was put out. And in the blue is serious thoughts of suicide. The blue is these are people who are really contemplating it, but haven't acted yet. The green is people who have attempted to end their lives, you know, suicide ideation versus suicide attempt. It seems that Alaskan Natives and Native Americans and Caucasians have higher suicidal ideations and Latinos, but African Americans tend to attempt more often. So the ratio between suicide ideation and suicide attempts is higher in the Black communities and the Asian communities, you know, almost 1 in 4, almost 1 in 3, or like 1 in 4 as well with Black and Asians. With Caucasians, it's almost like 1 in 5. So there's a slight increase in the ratio between suicidal thoughts and suicidal attempts. You know, I went to a training just like this, like a conference like this, and the presenter was discussing suicidal rates, and he said the highest suicide rate if you break it down by individual groups, the highest suicide rate is Caucasian men over 50 in the United States. They say that white men over 50 kill themselves more often than any other group. And the lowest rate in the United States is African American women over 50, you know. And this sparked a great debate, a great conversation, and there's no right answer of why it is this way. But does anybody have an idea or a thought process on why it is that Caucasian men might kill themselves more and African American women rarely kill themselves at all over 50? Anyone have any thoughts there?
I have input on Black women. Going back to what you talked about before, life, just being born a Black woman means struggle in most areas, and you just take life as it is and you work through it. So the thought of not being able to get through it, I guess, it's just not a thing. It's just you take the struggles that you're given and you work through it. I can't speak for white men, but I would imagine since it's almost the exact polar opposite, they tend to not have the struggles of life put on them from birth, and maybe are less mentally equipped through struggle to deal with hardships. That would be my guess.
That's a good theory.
I wonder also too, Rhi, with the Caucasian men, I can't speak for them either, but I wonder, do they have maybe more access to means? And
could be.
I mean, I know I'm speaking on their privilege there, but I wonder if that could be also.
That could be it. Yeah.
So.
I love these sort of Socratic dialogues. We're just theorizing. That I think there's no right or wrong answer. Those are possible correlates to the higher suicide rates. One of the thoughts that the presenter had was Caucasian men usually have more power and authority, and as you get older, that power and authority decreases. You retire, you know, your family, your kids move on. You're not needed as much in the family as you were in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. And oftentimes you'll see Caucasian men whose wives have either passed away or have left. A sense of helplessness and hopelessness comes on. So I don't mean that in a general way, but that's something that the presenter presented. Also with African-American women, the community reliance on older African-American women is heavy. You know, you go to my church, I have a Black church, and if a older African-American woman tells me to shut up, I'm gonna shut up. If she tells me to sit down, sit down. Yes, ma'am, whatever you say. They are community leaders, and the family often relies heavily on the grandma, Black grandma. And I think that a sense of identity or sense of purpose contributes heavily to the lower rates with African-American women. So, yeah.
Can I add to that?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that you just spoke to two very prominent people in my life. Grandma Jordan is what we call her. She's actually my ex-husband's grandma. She raised 4 different generations of people in the same house. And they gather every year on her birthday to honor her because she's still kicking. And just out of respect, I put my hand out to help her out of her car. She still drives. She drives a little PT Cruiser. And she smacked my hand and said, girl, get out of here. If I don't use it, I'll lose it. And I was like, oh my God, I want to be like you right now. Never mind at that age. You know, and on the flip side of that, my grandfather, who was a white man, he had expressed before he did take his own life, he expressed not feeling needed anymore and he couldn't get a job. And those are things he would say. Of course, at the time, I didn't know that, you know, those were kind of signs of his plan, but you just spoke directly to what is true in my life with this theory. So
thank you for sharing that, Ree. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's good to, I mean, I'm sorry for the loss, but it's good to hear that the science is doing what it's supposed to do. Does anyone have any more thoughts before I move on? I want to make sure I give enough time. Any other thought? Kimberly, were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in with just thinking about Joyner's theory and related to that burdensomeness, that feeling of being a burden, and thinking about the decline in health, the change in financial status, like all of those things that could be happening at that potential time, and feeling sort of like that burden, or even being in isolation and being alone, that I think all those things might be factors there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Kimberly, for that. You jumped right ahead. That's what we're going to discuss. Joiners, you know it right away. So yeah, we'll talk about joiners down the presentation, but that sense of being a burden is one contributing factor to suicidal thoughts and suicidal attempts. So just a quick, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that the first thing I thought about when you asked the question is, because Black women have so much responsibility, they may resist suicide because they're concerned about who's going to take care of their families. And I would think, of course, I don't know this for a fact, but you know, maybe for a Caucasian male, he has high insurance coverage. He feels his family will be all right and taken care of, and they might even be better off. So I think it could be just 2 different perspectives in that regard.
Yeah, that's very important, right? And right there, that's we'll talk about it a little bit later. But one of the theories of suicide types is I need to kill myself, which is better for the people around me. You know, it will help the people around me. That's kind of related to mental health, but relates to more sociological factors. You see this with kamikaze people in Pearl Harbor. They took their life for the greater good. You know, sometimes people who bring shame to their family will take their life for the greater good. So that's called the fatalistic sort of fatalistic perspective on suicide in communities. So thank you for that, for sharing that. Just real quick, I just added 1 slide about youth. My presentation isn't about the youth, but there are BIPOC youth. You know, there are lots of BIPOC youth, and specifically related to social media, you're seeing a lot of kids with technology. They are. When I was a kid, if I wanted to know what was going on in the world, I had to wait till 7 o'clock news or pick up a newspaper. Now, every single terrible story pops up on your phone every second of the day. You know, you have access to so much more negative material, and a lot of youth, BIPOC youth that I've talked to, present with sort of this real angst, this existential angst of the world is terrible. There's all these bad things, and you'll see rates of sexual behavior and drug use are on the decline in BIPOC youth. You're seeing there's some research that suggests that, but the rates of self-harm and suicidal ideation and attempts are increasing significantly. When I was a child, when I was a teenager, cutting and suicidal thoughts, it was around, but what was around more was weed and sex. That was what was mostly around. Now, the isolation and the increased social media and awareness of all the negativity around us, I believe has increased rates of self-harm and potential suicide. After white Caucasian men, that presenter said, after Caucasian men being the highest rates over 50, LGBT youth over LGBT teens were then the next highest rate of suicidal ideation, suicide attempts. So imagine you're a BIPOC LGBT youth. Oh, that would be so hard, because you're struggling out you're figuring out your sexuality. You're dealing with racism and discrimination, societal factors, and the struggles of being a teenager. Just being a teenager alone is enough. Imagine being in the BIPOC community and a LGBTQ. That's one of the contributing factors to the higher suicide rates with BIPOC teenagers and LGBTQ community. So I'd like to get into the risk factors for just a little bit. I wanted to make it simple. There was a list of hundreds of risk factors, but just one of the most important risk factors is if you've had a past suicide attempt or if you've had past suicidal ideation. It doesn't mean you're going to, but the past suicide attempts contributes heavily to future suicide attempts. You can judge future behavior by past behavior. The way I would tell my patients in the hospital, I was director of psychology at Gateways Hospital for about 6 years. And I would tell some of the patients that came in with their first suicide attempt or first suicidal thought, I gave the analogy of saying, let's say there's a big dam, like Hoover Dam, and it's blocking the water. And a little tiny hole comes in that, pops in the dam, a little bit of water comes out. No big deal. You patch it up, it's fine. But if you leave that hole unaddressed for 6 years, 10 years, 20 years, that hole gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and that dam's going to fall down. So if suicidal ideation or suicide attempts aren't addressed and treated right away, that hole or that pathology gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you're 14 with your first suicidal thought, one suicide attempt, you might not complete it. It might have been a scare, or you might just been feeling bad, but untreated, that becomes an option. And you might have another attempt at 16, you might think about it heavily at 18, you might by 25, you've bought the gun and you're ready to do it, so untreated, it's very important to, treat it right away and patch that hole is what I call it. Another risk factor is family history of suicide. This doesn't mean if you have a family member who's taken their life means that you're going to do it. It's not a causal relationship, but there is a correlative relationship for some people, specifically in the BIPOC community. If once it's been in the family, it becomes an unconscious viable option for worst case scenario. Not saying for everyone, but some people see it as, my family did it. It was a little bit normalized in my family, so this is a potential option for me. So here are just two potential risk factors, and not saying that the family history is for every single person, but for some people, family history is a risk factor. The mental health risk factors are here. Drug abuse and dependence doesn't mean if you're abusing drugs, you're going to be suicidal, but there is a correlative relationship there, specifically with people who are heavily on the drug dependence. Anthony Bourdain, greatest job in the world, in my opinion, took his life. And some of the news was saying it was related to a relapse and the guilt of breaking his sobriety. Also, people with depression, suicidal thoughts is a common symptom of depression, but two of the most important factors in the symptoms of depression that relate to suicide is helplessness and hopelessness. I can't do anything to get out of my situation. My situation is never going to change. My future doesn't look bright at all. That's a contributing factor, another mental health risk factor. We'll talk about this a little bit later about people who are reactive in their way of wanting to take their life, where it's an impulse rather than a strong desire. But people with mood lability, not everyone with bipolar disorder is going to attempt suicide, but those mood swings can create an impulsive reaction, especially when you're going from depressed to manic. One of the psychiatrists in the hospital I was working at was talking about treating bipolar disorder, and sometimes you need to be careful when someone's on a depressive episode when and they have bipolar disorder. If you bring their depression up too quickly, it can overshoot the stable area and lead into a manic phase. And the suicidal thoughts that were present in the depressive state, if it overshoots and goes to a manic phase, they have the energy to do it now. They have the energy and the desire now to get up and take their life. So mood debility, bipolar disorder, these are untreated, can lead to suicidal thoughts and actions. Also, psychosis is a very common theme you'll see in psychiatric hospitals with people who have paranoid delusions or are so internally preoccupied that they're unable to grasp a sense of reality, and the voices are basically telling them to end their life. And more related to BIPOC communities, there is current and past trauma, in BIPOC communities. There's current trauma that's exists, that's present, and then there's past trauma. And there's this idea of intergenerational transmission of trauma, where something happens to me, effectively my DNA gets altered by the stressor, and the stress gets passed on to the child. Think about slavery in the United States, 400 years, 500 years of slavery, trauma after trauma after trauma to not just one person, but groups of people, a whole group of people. And it's only been over for 200, 100 some odd years. The trauma is still present in African-American communities, and it's been passed on from generation to generation. So understanding that current past trauma, which leads to PTSD-related symptoms, depression, anxiety, these are all risk factors as well for suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideation. So when someone needs help, here are some factors when someone needs help. If you have one of these, it doesn't mean you're gonna take your life. If you're not enjoying things anymore, that doesn't mean you're gonna die. If you have change in sleep patterns, that doesn't mean you're gonna end your life. But when any one of these factors aren't addressed through the community or through personal self-growth or with the mental health professional or your doctor, they all can lead to a suicide attempt. If you have 5 or 6 of these, there's a higher risk there. So understanding, I encourage people to not wait till someone's suicidal before you help them. They're a little bit socially withdrawn. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Let's work on that. Kind of like supporting fixing the problem when it's a tiny little seed, as opposed to trying to tackle this sequoia tree. All right. Yeah. So not all these will lead to suicide. And not just one of these is going to lead to suicide, but untreated, they all can. So now I'd like to thank you, Kimberly, for getting to the joiners theory. Now I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about, on a theoretical perspective of, why people take their lives. And this is related to BIPOC communities as well. Theoretically, why do people end up taking their lives? And before I jump into the theories, does anyone here have a thought process on that? Why is it that humans have this, phenomenon about themselves where some will take their lives? Has anyone ever thought about that?
I can say there was a time in my life, where I had this thought. Now I understand why people have thoughts of suicide. And it was because I had gotten to a point where I felt stuck in life. And so I didn't have total hopelessness, but I did have that thought of, I've never understood why someone would attempt to take their own life until this day. Yeah. And then just having that thought and realizing I understood why almost scared me out of it, because I had just lost my grandpa recently. But I can say that feeling like you have no options out of a tough situation is a guess of mine.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that your ability to empathize with people, that's strong. It might have been scary, but I look at that as your ability to connect and understand people, what they're going through. So thank you for that, Ree. Anyone else have a thought process or just a theory in their mind? Why is it that humans Some of them take their lives. And feel free to put it in the chat too, if you feel comfortable. So we're going to go over just two basic theories, Joiner's interpersonal theory and then Durkheim's sociological theory, and then the typology theory. This is something I made up. It's not research-based, so don't take it as research, but it's something I've observed in the hospitals where I was working. Joiner's interpersonal theory looks at three major factors that contribute to a suicide ideation or suicide attempt, lethal or non-lethal. The three factors here, you probably are aware of this, but the one is thwarted belongingness, where you feel alone, you feel isolated, you're not connected with any group, with any family, you're just by yourself. That in alone of itself might lead to some suicidal thoughts, but it's not always like going to cause a suicidal thought or suicide attempt. Feeling alone might create some sadness, but not necessarily a suicide attempt. If you feel alone and the lack of belongingness in your community and you're perceived as a burden to other people, that's the suicidal thoughts, the suicide attempts become more real. I'm alone and I'm a burden, you know. That in itself won't be pleasant, but you still need one more factor, and it's the capacity to kill yourself, the capacity for suicide. I'm not afraid to die. I'm alone and I'm a burden, and I'm not afraid to die. Like that, Joiner's idea here is if you fit in all those three, you're very heavily likely to end up taking your life or at least thinking about suicide. There's another, this is a more macro sociological theory, Durkheim's sociological theory. He talks about four categories of groups in society that contribute to suicidal events or suicidal actions. So the egoistic suicidal person or the egoistic suicidal group lacks social integration and feels detached and isolated, just like Joiner's, thwarted belongingness. So if you're a member in a group, a society where you just don't feel you don't feel a part of the group. You might be a BIPOC individual. Let's say you move from Afghanistan to Minnesota due to the refugee situation. You don't feel connected to the people of Minnesota at all. You just don't feel that could possibly lead to suicide due to the egoistic classification. There's also altruistic suicides, which mean that people are fully socially integrated. They are a part of the system, they're a part of the society, but death is a benefit. In their mind, death is a benefit to the greater good. Losing my life it will benefit the people around me. Like I said, you'll see this with kamikaze pilots during Pearl Harbor. Like, if I take out this ship, it's good for my country, so I'll do it. You also see this with some Japanese families. Some Japanese and Chinese, shame on the family is a really hard thing to deal with, and it can lead to, it's better for me to take my life than it is to continue to shame the family. So the last two, anomic suicides, anomic cultures with suicides have minimal social integration, and the lack of social integration, the lack of connection in society creates a lack of meaning and purpose within themselves. And you find a person without meaning, without purpose, a mental health depression, a suicidal thought will follow. Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and one of his premises was how we thrive through suffering is finding meaning and purpose in the suffering, and finding some kind of purpose in what we're doing and defining ourselves. So if you're socially isolated, if you are not connected into the society around you, and you don't have the meaning, you don't have the purpose, the thoughts of suicide, I believe, potentially go up. And the last one here is fatalistic suicides or fatalistic communities. This is where social regulation is extreme. There is too much oppression, too much regulation. You can't go here, you can't go there, you can't do this, you can't do that. And then the person or the group, the people in the group feel it better to end their lives than to live like this. You'll see this, the fatalistic suicides in jail often, where people are so afraid to just live the rest of their lives in jail, they'll take their lives. Or you'll see this, you've seen it in slavery situations where people take their lives. This is just so terrible. I'd rather be dead than to do this. So thinking of BIPOC communities, I see fatalistic classifications, I see anomic classifications, and I see egoistic classifications. Lack of social connection, feeling not integrated into society, feeling like the society's too oppressive, feeling a lack of purpose due to lack of resources and lack of funding. So I think the sociological theory might be on point in understanding some of the societal factors that contribute to suicidal thoughts and ideation in BIPOC communities. So this last theory, I hope I have enough time. This last theory is me. So I created this. Don't worry, it's not research-based. It's just from observation. When I was working in psych hospitals, people would come into the hospital and I could see different reasons they would come in, especially when it came to suicide. Some people had a reactive suicidal statement or suicidal attempt. This was, they broke up with a partner, they got fired from a job, or they got a bad grade in school, and it was just impulse and it happened. The second type is the recurrent type. These people are constantly thinking about it, constantly multiple suicide attempts. More often than not, a severe mental health problem is related to it. And they've had 6, 7, 10 suicide attempts, and they're just it's constantly on their mind. And the last is the manipulative type. I know that sounds biased, but in terms of manipulative, that using suicidal statements or actions to get a certain outcome. I've had students tell me in the psych hospital, yeah, we had a big test coming up. I threatened suicide, so I didn't have to go. I could kick it here for 3 days, Or I've seen when on the adult units that I was working, I've had adult individuals say they were threatening suicide because they didn't want their partner to leave them, and saying that made the partner stay. So this is, I don't know, they're not research based. If you're looking to do a dissertation, take it, run with it, just cite me if you want to use this. But I've seen reactive, recurrent, and manipulative types in when it comes to suicidal attempts and ideation. You guys, this might be review for some of you, but I just want to make sure we go over it. When you assess suicide, it's important to look for these 3 factors. Is the person thinking about it? Has it been just a thought process? Do they want to or do they not? Do they have intent? Do they plan to do it? And do they have means? Those 3 basic: ideation, intent, means. Ideation, intent, plan, means. This is probably a review for some of you, but if you just have ideation, the risk is high. If you have ideation intent, the risk is very high. Ideation, intent, plan, and means, you got to get them hospitalized right away or do some kind of intervention. The risk just increases the more factors that you have, And I don't know if I might be speaking to the choir, but I want to throw it out there. Hospitalization is needed. It can be for suicidal statements, suicidal thoughts, ideation, plan, but also if you're homicidal or wanting to hurt someone else with an intent, plan, and means. That's the reason for hospitalization. And these are related to mental health challenges, or if someone's gravely disabled, meaning they're so ill, mentally ill, they cannot take care of themselves. They can't give themselves water. An example of this was a patient, it was like 100-degree day, and they had 7 sweaters on and 4 pairs of pants walking downtown Skid Row. And they were doing that because they didn't want the satellites to read their thoughts. So they would overheat and die of exhaustion. So that's another factor, being gravely disabled mentally, that can get you hospitalized. For BIPOC communities, a lot of them use, when suicidal thoughts or suicidal statements happen, they use the hospital, the emergency room, or the psych hospital as the only source of treatment. More often than not, it's going to be 72 hours or a week. Sometimes if you get conserved, it goes to 90 days or potentially a year. But most often, people who come in the hospital are going to stay 72 hours to a week. And if that's the only source of treatment, it's not enough. Hospitals will give out referrals and make appointments for people, but the research suggests BIPOC individuals often don't follow through with those referrals and only use the psych hospital as the source of treatment. So yeah, that's why I want to sort of bring up hospitalization and its importance. You probably have heard of this before, but I just want to make sure I reiterate it with you, for yourself, for your patients, for the family members around you, just for friends. A safety plan is very important and something that you might do when you're in treatment. A safety plan can be something simple as tangibly writing on a piece of paper and putting it on your fridge or your door. I know I'm triggered when blank. You know, what are some signs that I need help? Write those out, put it out there, you know, and who are some people I can call or access or connect with that can give me support when I'm struggling? Is it my mom? Is it my therapist? Is it the crisis line? You know, is it my neighbor? And what are some things I can do to make myself feel better? Write that out. Is it wrap myself in a warm blanket? Is it jump in the shower? Is it go for a run? You know, is it workout? Is it deep breathe? And the last, I added this for my safety plans, reasons I want to live, you know, and just reasons I want to live. You know, a kid told me if he died, he wouldn't be able to play video games anymore. And I was like, great. That's the reason you want to stay alive. Video games. Let's stay. If video games keeps you alive for 90 years, that's fine with me. If it's pizza, that's fine with me, as long as just finding something to live for. And also, I wouldn't put on their safety plan, but when assessing and supporting people who have suicidal thoughts, sometimes getting them out of the mindset of just what they're going through and explaining to them, having them imagine the feelings the family would have or friends would have if they lost them. So yeah, that's another, but that's a little tricky sometimes. BIPOC communities often use faith and spirituality as a source of support. And I think it's great, but I think we sometimes, BIPOC communities, only use faith and spirituality and religious organizations for everything. You know, all problems go through the church. My mom does not believe in what I do at all. She says, Jody, you don't need to be giving therapy to those patients. They just need Jesus and they just need to read the Bible. I'm like, all right, Mom, okay. She doesn't, and that's just a cultural thing. She was raised like that, the church to be the only source of support. So I believe in BIPOC communities, utilizing the spirituality, utilizing the church is great. MOG, the synagogue, the mosque, whatever, is great, but in conjunction with mental health professionals. Faith leaders need to connect with mental health professionals, and mental health professionals need to use the faith leaders and the people of spiritual prowess in the community to support these people, not just one or the other. And I believe faith leaders could work to help destigmatize mental health in their congregation or in their communities. So I'm gonna go through these real quick, but just a couple things in supporting yourself, in supporting your family. One, please take care of yourself. Exercise, try to eat healthy, surround yourself with positive material. You know, every day remind yourself of your meaning and your purpose. You know, if you can meditate, that really does help. The second thing is assess, what are my biases towards mental health? What are my biases towards people struggling with an illness or mental health illness? How have I acted in the past? How do I view mental health issues? You know, do I speak one game and act a different way? You know, do I really shy away when that homeless man walks by and grab my, you know, ask yourself, what are my biases towards mental health? If you can do this just in your work or in your family, destigmatizing how people talk about mental health. You know, like just talking about it with honesty and openness and, you know, compassion and empathy, as opposed to that person's weak, or that person has a lack of morality, that person has a lack of character. You know, I'm sure most of you do this already, but making sure you know the signs and symptoms of mental health challenges. What's the difference between anxiety and depression? What's the difference between bipolar disorder and schizophrenia? You know, just basic understanding of signs and symptoms can help you support family members and loved ones. And in supporting family members and loved ones, you can help them with their medication. You know, you can't prescribe it to them, but you can go pick it up from the pharmacy. You can put it in the little pill boxes for Monday through Friday for them. You know, you can help book appointments or find clinicians or services for them. And often you can attend therapy sessions with them if they allow it. You know, so being a part of their treatment can be really beneficial for someone who's struggling with a mental health challenge, avoiding them going down the road of leading to suicide. If everyone in this country, in this world, had supportive family members, I think the suicide rates would drop significantly. You know, so yeah, I encourage you to go down that route. And lastly, last two things, know the resources in your area. Oftentimes, if you have insurance, you can call the back of your insurance card, the phone number on the insurance card, they'll direct you to crisis services or therapist. There's also low-cost treatment in most communities. And make sure, I would go online where you are, look at the crisis hotline, type it in your phone and save it, and just save that, just to have it, so you have access to it. Also, I can tell you how many people, BIPOC individuals, have come to my office or even my students, and they don't know the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and explaining to BIPOC communities is important, the different types of treatment that are out there. Medication, group therapy, family, couples, individual therapy. I think there needs to be more education about the type of services that are out there for BIPOC individuals. And there's obviously also drug and alcohol treatment and support groups. So please take a second today or before the end of the month and just look at 2 or 3 resources in your area. Because if someone pops up who's struggling, you can always point them in that direction. Sometimes it's better to point someone in a direction than to try and save them yourself. And lastly, there are some societal changes that need to occur to support BIPOC individuals more to help decrease these suicidal rates. One is increase the funding and access to mental health support and treatment. Like I said earlier, decreasing police involvement and bringing aware the fact that BIPOC communities have different types of struggles and different types of barriers than Caucasian communities. And I would also encourage societal changes for there to be more culturally competent and diverse clinicians. More cultural competency will be more attractive to patients and people struggling and will help decrease those suicide rates. So everyone, I know I'm running out of time here, but thank you so much. Does anyone have we have 2 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we go?
My only comment is that was amazing. You knocked my socks off.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Guys, it's a pleasure working with you. And Kimberly, do you have a comment or question or anything?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say thank you so much to Dr. Adewale for being here again and sharing all this great information. I think something that we really, really try hard, and we've really done this, I think, pretty well this year, is focusing on these cultural differences too, and historical trauma and all these things that are real and real issues. And so I love that you talked about the destigmatization in general, but also the societal changes that we need to make along the way too. So really appreciate that.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for having me. You guys seem great. Happy Friday. Have a great rest of the week.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye, you guys. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
All right, man, Dr. Adewale, he's the man. All right. So now we are going to segue into our last break before we have our last presentation in 30 minutes by Dr. Mary Cooper. She's going to close out our symposium for this year. So, whoop, whoop, there's her, she's representing. So we will see you back at 3:30 my time and in 30 minutes, whatever time it is for you. So, thank you. All right, so welcome back. We are at our final session for our 4th annual Suicide Prevention and Awareness Symposium hosted by Active Minds chapter of APUS. And I'm proud to say we pull this off every year, despite whatever's going on around the world, in the country, because mental health matters 24/7, not just in May, not just in September. And we do strive to work to change the conversation on mental health and stamp out that stigma in everything that we do. And even though we're an online only chapter, we still have effect around the world, and I'm proud to be a part of this amazing group. So without further ado, we are going to have our wonderful advisor, Dr. Ratliff, introduce our other wonderful advisor, Dr. Cooper, for this final session. Thank you all for attending.
Okay, thanks, Rhi. So I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for this last session, and it is Dr. Mary Ellen Cooper. She holds a BA in psychology, BA in music, MA in counseling, an MBA in business with a concentration in leadership, and a PhD in human services with a specialization in counseling. She is retired from private practice as a licensed professional counselor, what we call LPC in our language. Currently, she's a full-time professor for American Public University in the psychology department. Dr. Cooper is a human services board certified practitioner, a certified clinical hypnotherapist, and certified life coach. She's a proud chapter advisor for both APUS's Active Minds and Psychology Club organizations. And she also wrote a book called The Greeter. So welcome, Dr. Cooper.
Oh, how sweet. Thank you for that introduction. And hats off to you and Rhi for all you do and all the officers for Active Minds. Y'all do a great job. And this is a huge undertaking. And I'm thrilled that I've had the opportunity to speak and close out the symposium. It's been 2 wonderful days. And I want to say I'm last but not least, because y'all chose me to be here, and I'm proud of that. And I'd also like to just say that I have a special surprise, a final request that Rhi has given. So after I finish, I will stop and say if anybody has anything to say, and then I'll close out with the special surprise, the special request that I have that Rhi has given. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Unless I close my screen. I think I did. Okay, give me a second.
You're good, Dr. Cooper. Just
somehow it went away.
Do like you did before, close everything else, not your Zoom, and then hit share.
Okay, give me 1 second. Talk amongst yourselves.
While we're waiting, I will say that I put a resource that Dr. Ratliff shared last week, just in case you were unable to attend last week, the helper pocket card. I put that in the chat, and then I will repost during Dr. Cooper's presentation all of our links that I shared earlier. All right, and she's back. We can see it now, Dr. Cooper.
Awesome. What I want to talk to you today is about COVID and mental health. And I promise you, I was going to tell you a couple of things. First thing you're probably wondering is, those of you who don't know me, I'm from Georgia. So that question has been answered. And those of you who do know me, I'm still from Georgia. And today's presentation, I've got the 3 B's for you. It's going to be brief, it's going to be brilliant, and I'm going to be gone. And make sure you stay till the end, because I got a special request from Rhi for you. Today's talk I'm going to share with you is going to be about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if you know me, and some of y'all who are online do know me, we're going to do that, but we're going to do it in reverse. Reverse. We're going to talk about the ugly, the bad, and then the good. So let's start with the ugly. If you've ever seen a show that was called Dragnet, maybe you've seen it when it came on, it was on like Nickelodeon. There was a Dragnet show, and they became famous for saying, "Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts." Well, what we're going to hear first is some research that I came up with that looked at COVID and some of the things that came from mental health due to COVID. So you're going to see several screens that say according to. So according to some preliminary government data and CBS News special reports and the CDC, the US suicides dropped last year, defying pandemic expectations. So a year ago when we had this conference, we're all looking at some very, very dreadful numbers. And the good news was that we didn't see suicide drop as much as we expected. So we're going to give a whoop whoop out, everybody, whoop whoop, yeah, 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 that's good. But as in all research, there's going to be, you know, good, bad, and ugly. The number of US suicides fell nearly 6% last year, and the coronavirus pandemic, the largest annual decline in at least 4 decades. Suicide rates have gone down, and that's according to these 3 particular sites that I took a look at. Okay, but there's still some ugly. There's a lot of ugly. In fact, what happened was we saw, according to the CDC, over 81,000 drug overdose deaths occurred in the United States in the past 12 months, ending in May of 2020, the highest number of overdose deaths ever recorded in a 12-month period, according to recent provisional data that was seen by the CDC. So we saw a lot of prescriptions being written and a lot of overdoses that were street drugs as well as prescription drugs. So were those overdoses on purpose? Were those suicides? Were they accidents? Perhaps we'll never know about many of them. According to one report that Johns Hopkins University did, we currently live in a gun culture. As we've noted, they actually have a center, and they actually have a surge of gun sales amid COVID-19 worries experts. That was one report that Johns Hopkins put out. They talked about we have a perfect social brew for increased suicide risk due to such factors that a lot of us have heard about in the Symposium: social isolation, anxiety, financial ruin. Daniel Webster, who is actually the director of that particular, of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health Center for Gun Policy and Research. He's actually one of the nation's leading experts in the prevention of gun violence. He says so many folks experiencing those sets of emotions and conditions have access to a gun. I was telling someone the other day in coaching, they were talking to me about how can I prevent someone from killing themselves with a gun? And I said, well, one of the most simplest ways is to remove all the guns from the house. If they're not able to have access to something, then it's going to be very difficult to actually do that. Guns by far the biggest risk factor in completed suicides because they're so lethal, says Dr. Paul Nedstadt. He is a doctor and a psychiatrist. He's also the co-director of Johns Hopkins Anxiety Disorder Clinic. And he also gave an interview in that article that I'm quoting now, The Surge of Gun Sales and COVID-19 Worries Experts. If we go to gun.com, we can see that gun sales, they were very excited this year because the gun sales were the highest that they had been. And here is one of the articles talks about fueled by an estimated 8.4 million new first-time gun owners. Suggested gun sales data climbed nationwide throughout 2020 and closed the year out with a record high. So the annual totals of 21-year history, as you can see here, suicides account for 60% of all firearm fatalities, and even before the recent run on guns, 1 in 3 US households already owned a firearm. Guns by far the biggest risk factor in completed suicides because they're so lethal, says Paul Nedstadt from the Johns Hopkins Anxiety Disorder Center. And if we take a look at the chart on the left, you can see over the years how the sales of guns have risen. In 2020, you can see that they were higher than they had been in 4 decades, in fact. We also know that in 2020, the fatality data shows that were increased traffic fatalities during the pandemic. And the research, this particular research, states that risky driving behaviors, including failure to wear seatbelts, speeding, and drinking while driving, identified as contributing factors. I thought this was a very interesting research along these lines because we know that there are a lot of people that were off the roads. We had less traffic. Not as many people were driving. They were at home working, or their job was being delayed for various reasons. So to have an increase in fatalities, it makes you wonder how many of those were also suicides. But as we know, insurance won't pay for those. So perhaps some of those were actually due to suicides, and a contributing factor to that would have been, or an underlying factor that could have been, insurance policies would still pay out. While Americans drove less in 2020 due to the pandemic, the early estimates show that an estimated over 38,000 people died in motor vehicle traffic crashes. That's the largest projected number of fatalities since 2007. And this represents an increase of about 7.2% as compared to the 36,096 fatalities that were reported in 2019. I actually have a friend who is in charge of fatalities in a nearby county, and he confirmed, he said, our fatalities are way up. And he even said, I think it's due to suicides, but we have to write them up as car accidents. Here's two charts. The first one shows how many people had contracted the COVID during 2019, during the 2019-20 period, and how many deaths there were that were related to COVID. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in enormous losses in terms of human lives and economy in the United States. The outbreak has been continuing to heavily impact mental health of people. And that's around the world, not just in our society. A survey conducted during the last week of March of 2020 actually showed that 72% of Americans felt that their lives were impacted by the outbreak, which was a 32% increase from the survey conducted only 2 weeks earlier. And the results show a positive correlation between COVID-19 infections, casualties, and a growing public concern. Now let's talk some about mental health. We know that a lot of businesses closed during COVID-19, some permanently, some just for a temporary period. We know a lot of restaurants closed. We know a lot of restaurants switched to a lot of takeouts, a lot of deliveries. DoorDash was up. Services that deliver food was up. People started cooking in their homes and then inviting. I noticed on Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace last night, there were 5 people in my local area that were cooking tonight and tomorrow night and taking orders. And I even asked 2 of them, well, where are you located? And they said, my home. And they said, I'll give you the address once you give me the order and pay for your meals. And I'll just have them on my front porch and my husband will be there waiting for you. So I thought people have actually become creative in ways to make money. Based on the University of Minnesota's research is an article entitled U.S. Job Losses Due to COVID-19 is the highest since the Great Depression. They also stated the number of jobs lost more than doubles the number seen during the 2007 to 2009 Great Recession, when 8.7 million Americans lost their jobs. According to the USA Today article, of the 20.6 million jobs lost, 18 million of those are expected to be temporary when the pandemic recedes. According to the National Library of Health, there are multiple lines of evidence that indicate that the coronavirus disease of 2019, COVID-19 pandemic has prolonged psychological and social effects. Studies indicate that the COVID-19 pandemic is associated with distress, anxiety, fear of contagion, depression, and insomnia in the general population and among healthcare professionals. Social isolation, anxiety, fear of contagion, uncertainty, chronic stress, economic difficulties may lead to the development of depression, anxiety, substance use, and other psychiatric disorders. And in vulnerable populations, including individuals with pre-existing psychiatric disorders and people who reside in high COVID-19 areas. So we could probably add to that list, you probably know someone that you could add, say, yes, they've had this, they've had that in the list, or you could actually add to that list of some other things that you've seen that have affected them in the mental health area. either through your own therapy work or maybe family or friends. We've seen that this particular article that was published talks about stress-related psychiatric conditions, including mood and substance use disorders, are associated with suicidal behavior. COVID-19 survivors may also be elevated suicide risk, and the COVID-19 crisis may increase suicide rates during and after the pandemic. Mental health consequences of the COVID-19 crisis, including suicidal behavior, are likely to be present for a long time and peak later than the actual pandemic. So we're not really sure right now of what we're going to see long term. I've talked to several people that have said after being isolated, not going back to work, now they're having problems going back to work, looking at people in the face, or actually thinking while the other person is talking, are you real? Are you really standing there talking to me? Am I asleep? Did I really actually get to leave my house? So it's almost a question of, is this reality or is this fantasy? Even in people that haven't presented any type of mental disorders before, could have had a lot of stress from the isolation and the uncertainty of what would happen during COVID. But since the coronavirus disease pandemic outbreak, many studies have demonstrated that a significant proportion of people who test positive for COVID-19 have a new onset of smell or taste loss. And the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the World Health Organization, and the National Public Health Authorities added new loss of taste or smell to the list of symptoms related to COVID-19. There is research out there talking about when and if taste and smell can come back, but it's inconclusive, because you probably know someone who has lost their taste or their smell. And in doing so, it's not just losing your taste or smell, but that's part of your reality. That's part of what makes us who we are. We no longer can walk into the kitchen or walk into a friend or mom's house and smell that apple pie that's cooking. Or, if we get a chance to go to the mall and smell that Starbucks coffee or smell those Cinnabons, which can trigger memories of being with your son or growing up and your father took you. So those types of memories are not being triggered because we do have, there are people who have lost their taste and their smell. Because of that, I want to talk about for a second people who already have pre-existing disabilities and mental disorders can actually, if you've ever worked with anyone who is schizophrenic or someone who had some type of psychosis, some type of paranoia, they already think that someone is watching them or someone's after them, or they may think that the light in the room, that there's a camera in there and they're constantly under surveillance. Well, with these factors of losing their taste or their smell, we found out over time before COVID that certain types of psychotropic drugs, some given to schizophrenics, can actually make them lose their sense of taste or change their taste to make food taste metallic. So the loss of taste or smell could actually not only it could exaggerate some of the symptoms that we do see in folks that already do have mental disorders, because I've even worked with folks before that start taking their prescription medicine and say, see, I told you someone's after me, someone's trying to kill me because food doesn't taste the same, the texture's different, and I can't smell, so that just shows someone's after me. And I try to convince them that that it wasn't that. You need to talk to your medical doctor. We need to, set up a counseling session to talk about these things and look at the research. So losing your taste and your smell is attached to a lot of different things. Hopefully, we'll find something that's going to make the taste and the smell return, or hopefully over time, those who have lost their taste and their smell, that will return. But those can actually aggravate not only someone who didn't have issues before, but someone who has some type of a mental disorder where that could be in question, paranoia could be in question. Let's talk about the good. So we talked about the ugly, we talked about the bad, and I will say that the ugly and the bad are subjective. Your bad may be my ugly, your ugly may be my bad, but they're still ugly and bad are still not so good. So as Clint Eastwood would say, you know, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm gonna roll on down into the good. So let's think about what happened that was good during COVID. Well, the earth got to relax during COVID. They were able to reset. There was a lot of things in the environment that were able to reset. Some research shows that the earth had an opportunity to build a clear blue sky again, to build clean air. I can only imagine, I've heard soldiers talking about coming back from Afghanistan or different places and saying the earth, the weather was not good. It was dark skies all the time. There was a black smoke in the air. My lungs are filled with black smoke. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be home. I'm glad I'm out of that environment. Well, the earth had a chance to clean up the air. And if we're breathing air that's not good for us, and that's going to affect us mentally, it's going to affect us physically as well. So during the lockdown across the world, they got to see the sight of blue skies created a sense of optimism in people. I've actually taught in China and in Vietnam before, and all throughout China, people would say, I have a question for you. And I would think it would be related to school. And they say, Professor Cooper, they say there's a place that you live, you can see the stars at night. And I would say, yes, I can see the stars at night. And they say that in the daytime, you can see the blue sky. And I would say, yes, there's places you can see the blue sky. And I remember one of my translators in China even said, my grandfather has told us of a time in China where he lived, he could see the stars at night and it was clear. And he told us this because the environment is polluted now. And I said, pollution will block out the sun. It will block out the sky. And yes, that could be a definite problem. So the earth got to heal somewhat. And in turn, that helped us to heal as well. Before COVID-19, all over the world, there was, people were suffering from a high level of urban air pollution, especially from different forms of that pollution. And the major sources of pollution, such as transportation, industries, power stations, were responsible for this increased output of all those pollutants. Well, during COVID-19, the majority of those sources did have to shut down. So although there's the bad and there's the ugly, there was some good too. University of Houston did some research that found Hispanic and Latino adolescents also had an elevated levels of mental health problems prior to the pandemic, actually experienced a reduction in symptoms during the early ages of the public health crisis. In this particular research, they talked about how they could sleep better. They talked about how they were able to actually felt like they felt better. And the University of Houston contributed part of that to families being home. They knew that mom and dad or whoever the caretakers were going to be there. They didn't have to wonder what's for dinner. They didn't have to wonder about, well, are they going to be home at 5 o'clock? Are they going to be home at 6 o'clock? And so they actually saw a reduction in the groups that they studied. But probably in your own life, you got to see that you got to spend more time with your family or those that were in your home, or you got a chance to exhale a little bit. And maybe you painted that room that you've been planning to paint for a while. And Fortune magazine reported that more than 110,000 eating and drinking establishments closed in 2020. Now, we don't know if that was permanently or if they're actually going to open back up, but a lot of us learned about takeout and a lot of us learned how to cook. I have to say I'm one of the ones that's probably more heavy on the takeout, but I am trying to learn to cook. My idea of cooking is kind of Pop-Tarts, where you open the envelope, you stick it in the toaster. I always say if it takes 2 steps, it's cooking. If it's 1 step, that's eating. So anyway, I think about, a lot of places, a lot of local restaurants were very thankful to get to when I would go and get takeouts, and they would say, thank you so much. Please tell your family and your friends to come and do our takeouts. This is the only way we're going to be able to survive. And so I felt like I was still helping the community and they were helping. It was a win-win situation as well. So we learned about takeout. We learned that restaurants, and as I mentioned on Facebook Marketplace, the ones that I've seen, and you may be doing this as well, we're cooking at home and then selling that. And I think that's something that we probably saw several generations ago do, and we're learning how to do that again as well. So that's been a good factor. We found books again. The libraries are changing and growing and helping our communities. They're doing curbside pickups. They're doing ebooks. I think it's wonderful to see that we found our books. We found music again. We see music stores that are struggling to get instruments out there. People said they could only see so much TV. They could only be on the internet for so long. They had to learn to do something. They had to read. They had to play an instrument. And I think we have to look to be positive. We have to look around us and choose to be happy. We see people who are happy around us. We see people who are sad. We see all kinds of negative things. We've been through 2 days of lots and lots of very, very sad situations, very sad stories. But I think in the end that we do have to look around and find out what sometimes you have to look at what's left and make that very positive. And I found a reading that I always think about when times get tough. You have to think about the Apostle Paul in Philippians in 4:11. He says, "Not that I speak in respect of want, but I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therefore to be content." We're all going to have yin and we're going to have yang, but we have to find a good balance of those. And that's my good, the bad, and the ugly. And if Ree or anyone has anything else to say, and then I have my special surprise to close.
Hi, Mary Ellen. So something that you said that I kind of want to piggyback on a little bit is, I noticed you mentioned positive, and I think of it as finding hope.
Yes.
That rather than like happiness and positive, because I think sometimes when people say find the positive, it ignores the fact that there are real emotions that are sad.
Yes, there are.
Uncomfortable. And sometimes that can force people to internalize that instead of processing it, you know. So I kind of look at it for where do we find the hope in the situation rather than where do we find happiness, because happiness is just it's out there, and yes, happy is a real feeling, but I think sometimes people get lost in finding that. And so if we can just cling on to some sense of hope and that's really where it is. So
I think that's a very good analogy. I think about Winnie the Pooh, because he says sometimes I can't change my attitude, so I change my shirt instead. So I think he focuses, to me, that says he's focusing on something else, and it's like changing the channel. So like you said, you have to find your own hope.
I like that. When you can't change your attitude, change your shirt. Right, you change what you can, right?
Go for a walk, change your environment.
Yeah, so I heard you getting choked up. You're choking me up a little bit, but I love the authenticity and the sincerity in the presentation. I wanted to say, poor Dr. Ratliff read my bio, and I have a quote from Hamilton in there on purpose. And, you know, when he says, you know, I'm the one thing that I can control. And so that really is like a life motto that I have. And I also try to teach my son that, like, when he's like, God, this guy makes me mad and I just want to hurt him. when I hear him saying that, I know it's a very natural thing, especially if you're a protector. But then when I tell, Isaiah, yeah, well, if you want to go to jail, go for it. Or you could work on what you can control, right? Which is your emotion about the situation and take a step back. And so all that kind of stuff, focusing on the good is a choice, right? Or we can focus on the
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think what's touching to me is we are seeing people read again and turn to music and do things like that. We kind of lost that. And that to me is very special. Over the years, I went to different live events and see a standing room only crowd to going from that to seeing hardly anyone there. And then I think now that we are seeing events again, we're seeing more and more of that. And we're also seeing the libraries come back, which is exciting.
Yeah, so I was sharing in the chat, I'm like, check your local library. If your local library isn't awesome, use ours, because San Antonio Public Library has a very robust online life as well. And they really stepped it up over the quarantine, and they continue to have them. Because I think what we learned during this pandemic quarantine is some people can't get out there and do stuff, but they can stay connected through virtual events, So I think the good, the bad, and the ugly, like you were sharing, some of the good is, despite it being virtual, some people are way more connected now. And one of my other favorite turns has been, I've seen so many folks who are grandparents maybe, who live across the country, and before they never got to see or talk to their kids and grandkids. But now that nobody can go anywhere, now they have, weekly Zoom or FaceTime chats with their family that they didn't have before because no one made the time. So I think that kind of stuff is so good for our mental health as well. To include us, we meet with my family up in Alaska about once a month just to see each other's faces, because why not? Right? Why not?
Right.
So, all right, let me check the chat. I thought there was a question.
I want to bring one other thing up too, if that's okay, if we have time and space, is that at the very beginning, I don't know if anyone on this call experienced this, but at the beginning of the pandemic, if you were a parent and trying to help your children with school stuff, and you were working full-time from home, and you were trying to juggle everything, there was a moment of real frustration with people saying, oh, I'm baking bread now, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that. And I was just like, oh, I can't do any of that. I'm in a space where I am stretched. I'm trying to help my kid with their schoolwork. I see you nodding, Rhi. And so just being mindful that, all of the coping skills and all of the things that we do, in that regard, that the pandemic threw us in a situation that some of us were so stretched that it was even harder to build in some of those routines that we normally had. And so I didn't know if anyone else experienced that in the beginning. I think we've kind of settled in now and kind of gotten in a rhythm, but yeah, that was my initial reaction was, okay, that'd be awesome if I could just stop and bake bread, but I can't. I don't have time. I don't have time to garden. I don't have time to do that.
Or the people suddenly losing weight because now they have time to exercise. Well, good for you. And there was like the little devil in me that was like, maybe it's because you lost your job and now you have time. Well, lucky you, And then I had to remind myself to be thankful that I had a job. And even though I'm stuck at a computer and I don't get to go exercise because I don't have all this extra time, to, again, be thankful for what I did have, because I'm telling you, that witch in me was really, the claws were out. I was so frustrated with that, right? And it's people expressing their positivity. And meanwhile, I'm over here hating because that's where my heart was and I had to check it. So I hear you. I will say I was thankful to one God and every God that I did not have a toddler. And God bless those people who, in addition to everything we just mentioned, also had babies, but more importantly, mobile, like 1, 2, 3-year-olds. I just couldn't imagine. I could not do it. So
anyway.
I
just wanted to voice that and bring that out, because I know sometimes when I'm in these presentations and everybody talks about all the great, coping things that they were able to do, just acknowledging that it's been tough at moments, depending on where people are. It's kind of that image of, we're not all in the same boat, we're all in the same storm. I kind of think of that image that, instead of being, we're all in the same boat, we're all in the same storm, yes, but just in different boats experiencing that storm.
Yeah.
Well, did you get to keep walking? Did you get to, I guess you couldn't do any of your 5Ks, but did you keep walking and exercising during that time?
Not completely. Yeah, there was a lot of pause, Mary, because a lot of the races, all of my races were canceled. So it was just a lot of pause at the time and just reshifting things. So yeah.
All right, Rhea, you ready for your special surprise? Your request?
Go for it, ma'am.
Anybody else have anything to say?
Again. No, ma'am, I'm ready for my surprise. Go for it.
All right, here it comes. Here it comes. I got a feeling everything's gonna be all right. I got a feeling that everything's gonna be all right. I got a feeling that everything's gonna be all right. Be all right now, be all right now, be all right, be all right. You've been waiting all year to hear that.
I love you so much. Thank you so much. It makes my heart so happy. And I know you don't have to do that, but you do it. And thank you.
Thank you.
I wish we could have weekly dates. That's what I want.
Bring it on.
All right. Do we have any other questions? You got a lot of woohoos, awesome, sing it, wonderful. Love it, love it, love it. Do we have any questions for Dr. Cooper before we close out here? Everything's gonna be all right. I love it. I did want to speak to Dr. Ratliff's comment about same storm, different boat. I have seen a pretty cool visual of that as well, and I think it's very powerful. Just in, alluding back to Dr. Lulu's presentation and Dr. Adewale's about the different struggles that different people have. Some people might be wholly incapable of even empathizing with because they are blissfully ignorant, or they legitimately just don't understand how life can be heavier for people who aren't in their seat of perspective and privilege. And privilege, by the way, I just want to make this note clear because I think it's important, especially when we're talking about mental health. When people say privilege, people hear white privilege, and I think that's unfair. White privilege is just one aspect of privilege. The fact that you have a home is a privilege compared to some. The fact that you have a job, like I talked about earlier, is a privilege compared to some. The fact that you might have 3 meals a day is a privilege compared to some. And so just remembering that, honestly, as Americans, we are in a seat of privilege simply by the passport we have access to. And the fact that you can find shelter, you can find food in this country, and that is not a thing everywhere you go, and it's not even a thing for everyone here in America. So just try to remember that. I think try to be a place of support and love and not of judgment or, well, if I can do it, you can do it. And I even remember Judge Huff said that last week, and she even comes from a place of when she's coaching her mental health court folks, what she means by that is you can also do it too. But I do caution folks when they say, well, if I can do it, you can do it, because it can be heard as a dismissive, well, you're not trying hard enough. And of course, we don't want to send that message either, especially in the mental health advocacy world that we are in. And I just want to send a personal thank you to each and every one of you who are either here now with us live or might watch this recording later. We do put a lot of work into coordinating this each year. And like I said, we don't let anything stop us. We did it last year and the depth of the pandemic, and we will continue to get together to do what we can to change the conversation about mental health, normalize it. You can talk about your broken foot, you can talk about your broken heart, and you can talk about your broken brain if it's broken. You can talk about your hurt emotions, just like you can talk about your hurt heart and your hurt hand. And I think it's important to also talk about, you know, some people take medicine for headaches, some people take medicine for high blood pressure, and some people take medicine for a mood swing that they might have. And there should not be that stigma that seems to permeate anyway. Is maddening. So as not only a mental health advocate, but also a disabled person advocate, I invite you to remember that not everyone's story is yours, and that's the beauty of different people, and to just find value in others and let them know that you value them. I think that's just as powerful. So here at Active Minds, we say you matter because you do. And that's our chapter kind of motto. And then of course, need you here is equally as true. And that is the national kind of hashtag, and also here for you. So as wonderful Olivia shared with us earlier, you don't have to be a professional like some of the doctors here online. You can just be you. And remember, if someone is coming to you with possibly a deepest, darkest secret they've never shared with anyone, or if they're coming to you because they just don't know who else to turn to, remember that that is another seat of privilege that you're in, the honor that they would come to you, and you have the trusted seat of listening. So I just invite you to remember that it's not your job to fix people, and you probably don't know how anyway, but the great and human thing to do is to just be there, be present, probably with your mouth closed and your ears open. That's always a great place to start. And if you don't know what to say, it's okay to say that, right? If you don't know what to say, but you want to be supportive of someone, then that's what you can say. Thank you so much for sharing with me. I don't even know what to say, but I'm so glad that you trusted me to share this with me. It's a great place to start. So with that, unless anyone, those are my closing thoughts. If no one else has any questions or comments or anything else, I'm going to officially close the symposium for 2021. You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming. All right, Ms. Chef, you can go ahead and end the recording. Thank you all for coming today.